fierce battle suddenly broke out in the middle of the forest as a carriage came under attack from a pack of wolves. The knights urgently called out to one another, ordering everyone to protect the princess at all costs and prevent the monsters from breaking through their defenses. The man dressed in a black suit declared that they had to retreat for the time being because the situation was quickly getting worse. At that moment, a man wearing a robe appeared. He was the infamous criminal known as Lobelia. He calmly observed the battlefield as the wild wolves slowly closed in on the carriage. The knights grew increasingly tense because every possible escape route had already been cut off. After carefully assessing the situation, Lobelia took out his spellbook and cast a spell meant to burn and scatter the small creatures. The knights, along with Julius, believed everything was over and assumed that Lobelia was about to attack them. Instead, Lobelia unleashed an advanced fire tribute spell known as Infernal Circle. The powerful spell instantly engulfed every wolf surrounding the carriage in flames until they were completely burned away. The blinding light forced several knights to shut their eyes, while the others stood frozen in amazement at the overwhelming display of magic. After eliminating every wolf, Lobelia turned his attention toward one knight who was staring at him in visible shock. He fixed his gaze on the knight and questioned what he was looking at. One knight lay on the ground with serious injuries, while another remained on one knee and asked Lobelia whether he had any connection to the rebels. Lobelia took out a potion and told the knight to forget about that question. Instead, he instructed him to drink the potion. He explained that it was a secret potion he had personally created and that its effects were far superior to those of the supposedly high-level healing potions. The knight accepted the potion and looked at it for a moment, wondering whether it was truly safe to drink. After hesitating briefly, he drank it anyway. The wound on his arm immediately began to heal as new skin rapidly regenerated over it. The surrounding knights watched in astonishment. One of them noted that the arm had been bitten apart, yet it had recovered almost instantly. Another knight was left amazed by the incredible power Lobelia possessed. The princess then stepped out of the carriage and walked toward Lobelia. She sincerely expressed her gratitude, recognizing that his actions had allowed everyone to escape the desperate situation. Lobelia dismissed her thanks, explaining that he had only acted to pass the time and for no other reason. The princess continued to insist that he had truly saved all of their lives. Before she could continue by offering him a reward in another form, Julius interrupted and stopped her, insisting that she should not do so and urging her to listen to him instead. Julius stepped in front of Princess Rian and questioned Lobelia about his true purpose for helping them, referring to him as an arrogant magician. The two nearby knights were taken aback, while the knight whose wounds had just been healed wondered why Lobelia carried the title of an arrogant magician. Without warning, every knight drew their swords and pointed them directly at Lobelia. Although they acknowledged that he had saved them, they declared that they could not allow the princess to remain exposed to any possible danger. Julius quickly took hold of Princess Rian and urged her to come with him at once. Before long, the princess was already inside the carriage as it began moving away from the area. The knights marched alongside the carriage as its escort. Just before the last knight could leave, Lobelia called out to the young knight and told him to wait. The young knight came to a stop and cautiously wondered why he had been called. Lobelia instructed the young knight to lead their group toward the west because their current route would eventually pass through a town where the Heroes' Knight Guild was stationed. He explained that the guild would protect the princess and remarked that the members of the Heroes' Knight Guild seemed capable of thinking about nothing except helping others. Lobelia suddenly placed a hand on the young knight's shoulder. The unexpected gesture startled the young knight, leaving him wondering why Lobelia had decided to share that information. Lobelia leaned closer and firmly warned the young knight to stop questioning him. He made it clear that if his advice was ignored, the princess's life would be as good as lost. After removing his hand from the young knight's shoulder, Lobelia instructed him to deliver the message to the grumpy-looking man, Julius, if he had understood everything. The young knight immediately acknowledged the instruction and hurried back toward the carriage with renewed determination. Once the young knight had left, Lobelia let out a deep sigh with a faint smile on his face. He quietly reflected on the title Julius had given him, the arrogant magician, before letting out a scoff. Meanwhile, inside the moving carriage, Princess Rian wondered why everyone feared Lobelia so much. From her own impression, he did not seem like such a terrible person. Julius explained that Lobelia was known throughout the land as a notorious villain. His full name was Lobelia Crowley, the man widely called the arrogant magician. Although he had graduated at the top of the Magic Academy, he had chosen to use his extraordinary abilities for his own benefit and to harm others. Countless people had lost their homes and even their lives because of him, making him someone many considered worthy of being called a demon. Julius firmly warned Princess Rian that she must never approach Lobelia again. The princess reflected that there had been no reason for Lobelia to help someone who was being pursued. It would have been far more beneficial for him to hand her over to the rebels instead. Julius admitted that he could never understand the way people who devoted themselves to black magic thought. Princess Rian quietly reflected on everything that had happened. Unlike her father, whose tyranny had ultimately led to his death, she had sensed no malice from Lobelia. Even more surprising was that he had asked for nothing in return after helping them. His words remained in her mind, especially his claim that he had only acted to pass the time and for no other reason. The princess found herself thinking that Lobelia had looked remarkably cool. Her thoughts were interrupted when the young knight knocked on the carriage window. He informed Princess Rian that he had a suggestion. The young knight explained that there was a Heroes' Knight Guild in the nearby town. He believed that if they explained their situation, the Heroes' Knight Guild might be willing to help them. In his view, that option was certainly better than continuing to flee without any plan. Julius appeared at the carriage doorway and asked whether the young knight was referring to the legendary Order of Knights. After hearing the explanation, Julius agreed that the legendary knights might indeed offer them assistance. Even so, the young knight could not reveal that the suggestion had originally come from Lobelia. His thoughts returned to the moment Lobelia had first called out to them. At that time, he had been certain that Lobelia intended to kill them. Instead, if Lobelia had not appeared, everyone would have lost their lives. Even after he and the other knights had pointed their swords at him, Lobelia had still shown concern for their safety. The young knight began to wonder if Lobelia truly was not as evil as the rumors claimed. That man was Lobelia, but before becoming him, he had been an ordinary human named Saikyou Arima. He had been a part-time worker who was about to turn 23 years old. His favorite hobby had always been playing video games, yet he had never imagined that he would one day end up inside one. Even more unexpectedly, he had been reincarnated as the most wicked villain in the story. The game was the classic fantasy RPG, Arcadia Fantasy, a highly popular smartphone social game that consistently remained at the top of the store rankings. The story followed a protagonist who awakened to the blessing of the brave flame and set out to save the world alongside the girl destined to stand by his side. That protagonist was Reinhard, a young man chosen as the hero through a sacred ritual. Although Reinhard had an ordinary appearance, he was loved and admired by many women as part of the game's setting. He was the unquestioned main character, earning complete trust from everyone around him. In contrast, Saikyou had been reincarnated as Lobelia Crowley, the most hated villain among all the characters in the story. Lobelia was one of the 12 individuals recognized as the strongest people in the world. He devoted himself to researching the forbidden art known as black magic. The book in his possession was Lobelia's experimental diary, and from its contents, it appeared that he had already mastered black magic to its highest level. Lobelia sat alone on a large stone deep within the quiet forest. He could not understand why he had ended up becoming a character like Lobelia. It was troublesome that he now had to constantly speak in the villain's forced manner of speaking. More importantly, he knew that Lobelia was destined to die by the end of the story. He wondered whether inheriting Lobelia's fate also meant that his own death had already been decided. He immediately rejected that possibility and resolved that he had to avoid such an ending no matter what. Besides that, Lobelia had always been Saikyou Arima's favorite character. One thought continued to echo in his mind. More than anything, he wanted Lobelia to receive a happy ending instead of the tragic fate that awaited him. Players often referred to Lobelia as the tragic villain. In reality, he was also one of the most beloved characters in the entire game. The reason for that admiration was found in Lobelia's past. Everything began during the Great Human-Demon War, the conflict that marked the final battle between the Demon King's army and the human forces. Lobelia had been born in a small village near the border, a place caught in the middle of the ongoing conflict. He lived together with his sickly father and his younger sister. Although they were poor, the three of them lived together peacefully and treasured the little happiness they had. At that time, Lobelia could not find a proper job. He wanted to stop stealing, but he knew they could not survive without money. As he walked, he wondered what excuse he should give his father. He had already claimed that he had been working at a store the other day, so this time he decided he would simply say that he had been helping in the fields. His steps suddenly came to a halt when he discovered a wounded demon lying face down on the ground. Having already experienced the world's cruelty and witnessed the suffering people endured, Lobelia decided that he could not abandon the injured demon. He shared the small amount of food that he had secretly kept at home. After the demon received treatment, he was deeply surprised that humans could show kindness to someone like him. He promised that he would never forget that compassion and wished the family good fortune. The demon was grateful that their paths had crossed, and Lobelia genuinely felt the same way. However, without Lobelia ever realizing it, the demon army that had accompanied the wounded demon eventually returned and destroyed his hometown. The men were slaughtered, while the women and children were captured and sold to human slave merchants. Lobelia himself was locked inside an iron cage. The screams of countless people echoed around him without end. His head throbbed with pain as overwhelming guilt consumed him. He blamed himself for everything that had happened and became convinced that it was all his fault. He came to believe that someone like him had never been capable of doing anything good. Day after day, he remained trapped inside the cold iron cage, consumed by guilt, enduring a life that felt no different from hell. One day, Lobelia finally managed to escape. One of the men noticed that one of the slaves had gotten away. Another man immediately became furious, blaming his companion because he had been told to replace the old shackles but had never done so. The guards quickly rushed after Lobelia, believing that he could not have gone very far yet. As he fled, the young Lobelia accidentally bumped into a noble-looking man. The man asked whether the boy was lost before noticing the iron shackles around his leg. He immediately realized that the child was a runaway slave. Feeling pity for him, the man believed that their meeting must have been fate. The noble knelt before Lobelia and gently placed a hand on the boy's head. He then offered to adopt him as his own son. The Crowley family was a rising noble household that had been unable to have children, and they welcomed Lobelia into their family through adoption. To prepare him as the future head of the Crowley family, Lobelia received an elite education. At the age of 12, he enrolled at the Grand Chariot Magic Academy, where his academic performance was exceptionally outstanding. One day, while he was reading inside the academy's vast library, another student approached him. The boy had been searching for the very same book and politely hoped to borrow it after Lobelia had finished reading. Lobelia simply turned his cold, narrowed gaze toward him. As time passed, Lobelia's violent behavior gradually became more severe. The heart that had been broken after witnessing hell during his childhood could never return to what it once had been. On the day of his graduation, Lobelia approached his adoptive father with pride after finishing at the top of his class. He believed he had reached that achievement because of everything his father had done for him. Instead of celebrating, his father reminded him that there was something far more important than grades and rankings. He believed that true value came from having a sense of morality. He pointed out that Lobelia's habit of hurting others without hesitation had never changed. In the end, he rejected Lobelia and declared that he was no longer his son. Even the kind-hearted Crowley family could no longer overlook the repeated trouble Lobelia had caused. Being cast aside by the father he loved filled him with anger, and that rejection pushed him into deep despair. Determined to destroy the world that had continued to betray him, Lobelia fell completely into the path of dark magic. His descent continued until he finally took another person's life. That moment marked the arrival of a young swordsman who stepped forward to confront him. The swordsman was Reinhard, the chosen hero, who stood before Lobelia with the determination to stop him. Lobelia fought alone against the entire Heroes' Knight Guild. The battle continued for 2 days and 2 nights. When the fight finally came to an end, Reinhard concluded that Lobelia could not overcome the strength that came from the bonds of friendship by fighting alone. He urged Lobelia to accept his defeat as an opportunity to reflect on the path he had chosen, believing that it was still possible for him to turn back. Lobelia was consumed by a humiliation unlike anything he had ever experienced. After hearing the words about the power of friendship, he could only laugh at them, refusing to acknowledge what he believed was nothing more than something pathetic. From that moment on, he swore to pursue Reinhard to the very depths of hell. He was determined to make the young hero experience true despair. Lobelia continued to grow stronger and challenged Reinhard over and over, hoping that one day he would finally surpass him. However, he failed to win even a single battle. Eventually, the number of his defeats became far too many to count. In time, he joined the very Demon King's army that had once destroyed his hometown. Even there, betrayal followed him once again. The Demon King's executives turned against him and placed a weakening curse upon him. That betrayal led directly to his final battle against the hero who had come to defeat the Demon King's army. After a fierce confrontation, Lobelia ultimately lost his life. As those memories resurfaced, Lobelia broke down in tears, believing that if such a life could not be called a tragedy, then nothing else could. Only after his death was the truth about his past finally revealed. Although players had originally hated Lobelia, learning about his life transformed him into the most beloved character among the fans. However, from Reinhard's point of view, Lobelia had always been nothing more than absolute evil. The people within the story also refused to search for the truth behind the man who had become the villain. By reliving Lobelia's memories, Sito Arima was reminded once again of the painful life that Lobelia had endured. It had been a lonely existence filled with betrayal, ending without receiving love from anyone. As long as he remained this character, there was no escaping the role he had been given. For Sito Arima, now living as Lobelia, there was only one path left. He had to earn the recognition of every single person in that world. Inside the eatery, Lobelia sat alone at a table while reading a piece of paper. After placing the last item of his order on the table, a member of the staff approached him and nervously asked for confirmation. Lobelia looked up and confirmed the order. The staff member told him to take his time before quietly leaving. Lobelia noticed that the innkeeper was clearly afraid of him, but at least he had not been thrown out. Ever since being reincarnated as the villain, he had been treated the same way wherever he went. Some people glared at him with hostility, others shrank away in fear, while some simply looked at him with strange expressions. Lobelia believed that the only way to escape such treatment was to erase his terrible reputation. If his memories of the game were accurate, an important event involving the defeat of the Dragon King would happen soon. The Dragon King, Boros, ruled over the Kansas territory and oppressed its people. Lobelia concluded that if he defeated Boros, people's opinion of him might begin to change, even if only a little. With that thought in mind, he decided to free the people from the Dragon King's rule. He believed that good deeds should never be delayed. The following day, he planned to leave by carriage and begin carrying out his plan. Before long, a man approached Lobelia and asked if he could speak with him. The man recognized him as Lobelia, the arrogant magician, and pointed out that he was infamous everywhere. He claimed to have a story to share and wanted Lobelia to work together with him. Lobelia showed no interest in the proposal. The man remarked that his response was rather cold before directing Lobelia's attention toward someone nearby. Lobelia turned his gaze and immediately recognized Claudia, one of the hero's knights. Claudia was known for her strong sense of justice, having risen from a commoner to become a knight. Lobelia wondered if she was one of the people in the story who hated him the most. He also began to suspect that she had been watching him ever since he entered the town. The man's patience finally ran out. He suddenly threw his drink directly into Lobelia's face. Lobelia remained completely unfazed. The man then spoke about how much reward he might receive if he managed to capture Lobelia. Without responding, Lobelia simply turned and began to walk away. Another man immediately stepped in front of him with his fists raised, believing it was the perfect chance to take advantage of the situation. The man threw a punch toward Lobelia, but Lobelia effortlessly avoided it. At the same time, he quietly began forming a spell in his hand while wondering if these men intended to hand him over to the knights. His eyes shifted toward Claudia, who returned his gaze. Realizing that she had noticed his magic, Lobelia slowly cancelled the spell forming in his hand. At that moment, one of the men grabbed him from behind. Lobelia reflected that with his current body, being struck barely caused any pain. Even so, remaining on the receiving end was still irritating. Lobelia then cast a wind attribute spell called Shock, instantly breaking free from the man restraining him. He swiftly moved behind the other attacker and struck the back of his neck, causing the man to collapse to the ground. Throughout the entire confrontation, Claudia silently watched everything unfold. Lobelia reflected that he had only wanted to take a short break, yet it had somehow turned into another troublesome situation. Some of the customers inside the eatery hurried to leave before the situation became even more complicated. They wondered who Lobelia really was after seeing two men brought down almost instantly. As Lobelia walked outside, he thought that he would have to find another place to eat. He also reminded himself that if he continued relying on magic for movement without properly resisting its effects, he would eventually become sick. Just then, a sharp voice called out to him. Claudia was convinced that he was the same man responsible for assaulting adventurers, and she made it clear that she was not the type of person to overlook such actions. She demanded to know what he was truly planning. Lobelia explained that he had only intended to enjoy a meal before being interrupted, forcing him to retaliate. Even so, he believed that someone like Claudia would never accept that he had actually been the victim. For a brief moment, Claudia hesitated. Lobelia continued by remarking that confronting him with incomplete information while clinging to fixed assumptions only revealed how shallow the hero's knight's training truly was. Claudia decided that arguing with an opponent was a waste of time. Without saying anything further, she turned around and walked away. Lobelia quietly felt relieved. He had been convinced that she was about to draw her sword. He realized that he had truly angered her and thought that he needed to do something about his sharp tongue. The following day, Lobelia and Claudia found themselves sitting side by side inside the same carriage. Neither of them was willing to speak first, leaving an awkward silence between them. Eventually, Claudia broke the silence by questioning why he was traveling in the same carriage. Lobelia explained that the passengers traveling toward the Kansas territory were either people connected to the region or those who had business with the Dragon King. He added that traveling there with the intention of defeating the Dragon King was certainly unusual. His words immediately irritated Claudia. She grabbed him by the collar, insisting that defeating the Dragon King was her mission and that if she failed to accomplish it herself, everything would become meaningless. The coachman's voice interrupted them from the front of the carriage. He apologized for interrupting and informed them that they could travel no farther because a massive pile of boulders was blocking the road. Lobelia decided that he would continue the journey alone from that point onward. After examining the obstacle, he concluded that he could destroy the rocks with magic. However, the Dragon King's lair was nearby, and using enough magical power to clear the path would reveal his presence. Without another word, Lobelia leaped over the boulders. A moment later, he heard another sound and realized that Claudia had jumped over them as well. Lobelia told her that it would be better for her to turn back. Claudia refused, reminding him that this was her hometown and that she had no reason to accept criticism from him. Claudia remained convinced that Lobelia had been lying about his intention to defeat the Dragon King. In her mind, his true plan was to defeat her first and then join forces with the Dragon King. Lobelia decided that he could not continue dealing with the argument and simply moved forward. Claudia called for him to wait, but as she did, she suddenly lost her footing and slipped over the edge of a cliff. Lobelia reacted immediately and caught her hand before she could fall. The moment she realized that he had saved her, Claudia's attitude toward him noticeably changed as Lobelia pulled her safely back up. Claudia apologized to Lobelia for what had happened. Lobelia simply told her to be more careful next time before continuing on his way. As they traveled, he quietly wondered whether she had sprained her ankle during the fall. That night, while they rested, Lobelia gathered some medicinal herbs and carefully mixed them into an ointment. He gently applied it to Claudia's injured ankle. After finishing the treatment, he explained that the injury should heal by the following day. He then instructed her to get as much rest as possible while he stayed awake to keep watch. Claudia found the situation strange. The Lobelia she had known before was someone she believed possessed neither humanity nor compassion. Lobelia admitted that was how he had once been. Claudia reflected that if he were truly still that person, he would have abandoned her instead of saving her. She then questioned what Lobelia intended to do after defeating the Dragon King. Lobelia answered that his only goal was to measure his own strength. He explained that her hometown meant nothing to him. When Claudia continued pressing him, wondering whether everything he was doing was simply to surpass Reinhard, Lobelia gave no clear answer and left her to believe whatever she wished. As the conversation ended, Lobelia's thoughts drifted elsewhere. In the original story, the Dragon King arc had been an event where the protagonist joined forces with the Dragon Knight, Zeke, to defeat the Dragon King. Claudia had only been meant to appear as a minor supporting character. Seeing her here made him wonder whether the story itself had already begun to change. Lobelia then turned to Claudia and questioned why she had come alone. He wondered what she believed she could accomplish by herself. Claudia had come prepared to settle everything even if it cost her life. She believed that her personal matters should not involve the hero's Knight Order, and she saw no reason to explain herself to Lobelia. Lobelia began to suspect that Claudia might have her own story that had never been revealed in the original game. Even so, he knew that defeating the Dragon King alone was impossible. In the original scenario, even joining forces with Dragon Knight Zeke had been necessary to finally bring the Dragon King down. Realizing this, Lobelia concluded that he could not allow Claudia to face the Dragon King by herself. Lobelia made it clear that if she truly wanted to free her homeland, then she should accomplish it with her own strength. As long as she did not get in his way, he had no complaints. Claudia continued staring at him, clearly irritated by the way he spoke. Lobelia simply repeated his earlier advice and told her to stop wasting time and get some sleep. A short while later, Claudia unexpectedly thanked Lobelia. When he turned to look at her, he discovered that she was already asleep. He soon realized that the words had merely escaped while she was sleep-talking. Lobelia quietly reflected that someone who had committed countless evil deeds was never supposed to receive gratitude so easily, if at all. The next day, as they continued traveling, Lobelia recognized that they had entered the Kansas territory. Even the former hero's Knight stronghold had fallen into such a desolate state under the rule of the Dragon King Boros. To Lobelia, defeating Boros should not be difficult, and he intended to get rid of the villain as soon as possible. That day was the annual occasion when the village of Glinta was forced to offer a sacrifice to the Dragon King. Lobelia believed that the Dragon King's goons were most likely strengthening their security at that very moment. Claudia warned Lobelia not to act recklessly. Lobelia made it clear that he did not need to follow her orders. Since the enemy would become more active after sunset, he believed it would be better to wait until dawn before looking for the right opportunity. While hiding in the bushes and watching from a distance, Lobelia noticed 4 men and found it unusual that the area around one house was so active. A young girl was dragged out of the house. One of the men formed a spell in his hand before releasing it toward the building, causing the house to explode. The girl desperately reached out to her parents as she watched the house being destroyed. Claudia quietly spoke the name Toto, making Lobelia wonder if the two knew each other. The goons laughed as they mocked the family for trying to help the sacrifice escape. Another remarked that they should have quietly offered their daughter instead. Seeing the girl break down in tears, Claudia did not hesitate and rushed forward. Watching her charge ahead, Lobelia found it ironic, thinking that she had been the one warning against reckless actions. Drawing her sword, Claudia moved with remarkable speed and appeared behind the men before cutting one of them down. The remaining goons turned in surprise, wondering who she was. Claudia immediately shifted her attention toward the last 2, while one of them panicked, unable to understand where she had come from. With another swift strike, Claudia's blade sliced across their throats, leaving the girl free. Toto immediately recognized Claudia, and Claudia apologized for arriving too late. Claudia explained that they had many things to discuss, but reaching a safe place had to come first. Before they could leave, a man stepped forward and calmly remarked that Claudia had killed his subordinates. The horned man approached with a relaxed smile. He stated that allowing the sacrifice to escape would create a serious problem. He declared that Claudia would be held responsible for the chaos. Claudia lowered her stance and raised her sword, preparing herself for battle. At the same time, she urged Toto to leave the area. Steel clashed against steel as Claudia's sword met the horned man's blade, sending sparks flying while the force of the impact pushed her back a step. Claudia declared that corrupt systems such as human sacrifices would all be abolished. The horned man simply answered with the same calm smile. The horned man observed that Claudia still seemed full of energy before launching a relentless series of strikes at her. Claudia focused entirely on defending herself as each attack came one after another. She eventually attempted a counterattack, but the horned man blocked it with ease, and their swords collided. In that brief exchange, Claudia realized that there was not a single opening she could take advantage of. The horned man looked down on her limited skill, finding the situation both amusing and exciting. As a servant of the Dragon King, he believed that attacks of this level would not even leave a scratch on him. With his final strike, the sheer force sent Claudia's sword flying from her hand. At that moment, Claudia realized that this could be the end for her, yet deep inside, she refused to accept dying in a place like that. Before the horned man could finish her, Lobelia suddenly appeared and drove a punch into the man's face, ending the fight instantly. Claudia was caught off guard by the fact that Lobelia had stepped in to help her. Claudia insisted that it had been her battle, but Lobelia brushed her words aside. He believed that if her goal was to throw away her life in a meaningless death, he had no reason to stop her. However, he intended to defeat the Dragon King by himself. He added that Claudia could simply sit back and do nothing. He then asked how much longer she planned to stand there and revealed that he had already helped the girl's parents earlier. He called for her so they could leave immediately. Lobelia pointed out that after killing the Dragon King's servants, it would only be a matter of time before a serious counterattack arrived. With that, he declared that they were invading the Dragon King's castle. Inside the throne room of the Dragon King's castle, the Dragon King received a report and calmly acknowledged that one of his important subordinates had apparently been killed. His attendant responded as though it had been expected and wondered whether the Dragon King already understood everything. The Dragon King wore only a faint smile, showing no sign of grief. To him, his subordinates could almost be considered one with himself. He reflected that Kansas was a comfortable place, rich in nature, free from girls dressed unnecessarily, and that the castle itself was also quite pleasant. The Dragon King ordered Shandy to eliminate the threat by any means necessary. Shandy lowered his head, accepting the assignment without hesitation. Shandy dispatched his selected servants to the village, believing that even the person who had defeated his subordinate could never overcome such a large force. However, as he looked down from the balcony, the sight before him stole his breath. The ground had become a scarred wasteland, burned black and ripped apart, while the broken bodies of his chosen servants lay scattered across the battlefield. Claudia stood back to back with Lobelia, her sword still in her hand as her tense expression reflected the scale of what they had just accomplished. Lobelia remarked that he had wasted his time dealing with something so trivial. Shandy stared in disbelief, unable to understand how they had defeated every one of his servants. To him, it was simply unbelievable. Lobelia then shifted his gaze toward the balcony. Before he could even spot Shandy standing there, Shandy had already disappeared. Claudia noticed his reaction and wondered what was wrong, but Lobelia dismissed it as nothing. Shandy rushed straight to the throne room, his voice filled with urgency as he tried to report the trouble at the castle gates. The Dragon King calmly asked what the problem was after noticing Shandy's distressed appearance. Shandy explained that the enemies were proving to be troublesome. Before he could fully describe the situation, the Dragon King cut him off, declaring that Shandy should have already dealt with the problem. The Dragon King reminded Shandy that he had guided him after he became the sole survivor of his destroyed clan. Because of that, the Dragon King had trusted him more than anyone else. Yet now, that trust had been betrayed. As the Dragon King raised his hand, Shandy sincerely begged for forgiveness. The Dragon King then brought his hands together, and Shandy's body was crushed instantly. The Dragon King quietly admitted that he was disappointed. Moments later, the doors to the throne room began to break apart. In an instant, they were completely destroyed as Lobelia and Claudia entered. The Dragon King remained calm as he recognized them as the unexpected guests. Although he remarked that their manners were lacking, he still welcomed them into his castle with a composed smile. The man introduced himself as Boros and declared that he was the Dragon King Boros. He acknowledged that he had unfortunately just lost one of his finest subordinates. Seeing it as a good opportunity, he offered Lobelia and Claudia the chance to become his servants, explaining that he had always wanted a powerful mage by his side. Lobelia immediately rejected the offer. Boros remarked that the answer had come rather coldly and far too quickly. He then questioned why Lobelia had challenged him, wondering if Lobelia intended to take control of Kansas in his place. Lobelia answered that he had come to free Kansas. Claudia quietly looked at him while Boros regarded that goal as troublesome. Boros believed it would be better to abandon such a hopeless struggle, insisting that even someone foolish should understand that. He then summoned his sword from the shadow beneath him, reminding them that he was a dragon and that there was no reason to expect a fair fight. Without hesitation, Boros swung his sword. Lobelia immediately cast a shield to block the attack, but the tremendous force still pushed him backward. Lobelia realized that a single swing carried incredible power. Before he could recover, Boros had already closed the distance and was standing directly in front of him with his sword pointed at him. Boros acknowledged that Lobelia appeared stronger than the humans living in the area. Lobelia regarded those who were the weakest as the ones who made the most noise. Boros questioned what he had meant. Suddenly, Lobelia grabbed Boros' sword with his hand and caused a crack to spread across its surface. Boros stared in disbelief, shocked that one of the strongest swords in the world had been damaged. Before he could finish reacting, Claudia moved in and drove her sword straight through Boros' head. To their surprise, Boros showed no concern over the wound. Instead, he casually remarked that the attack was inconvenient because he had planned to take his time and cherish Claudia later. Both Claudia and Lobelia believed that Boros should have died from such a blow. Claudia pulled her sword back and immediately attacked again, determined to kill him, but her strike caused no damage at all. Boros calmly drew his own sword, making it clear that she seemed eager to die. Lobelia instantly realized the danger. Without hesitation, he cast the wind attribute spell known as Shock toward Claudia, pushing her away before Boros could land his attack. The force sent Claudia crashing into a nearby pillar, where she lost consciousness. Lobelia quickly realized that he had overdone the spell, forgetting that Claudia was much lighter than he was. Boros recognized that Lobelia had used wind magic to save her from the attack. Impressed, he wondered whether Lobelia was a well-known magician. Lobelia then pulled out his spellbook. Boros noted that it was an unusually rare spellbook, explaining that even royal court magicians rarely possessed such an item, although its cover looked especially ominous. Boros wondered if it contained dark magic. Lobelia acknowledged that Boros had noticed and indicated that he would find out soon enough. He immediately released several jet-black spears toward Boros. Boros reacted without delay, firmly gripping his sword and deflecting every incoming spear with swift and precise movements. He then rushed directly toward Lobelia and prepared another strike. Lobelia responded by casting Shock on the ground, allowing him to evade the attack. Boros continued his assault without slowing down, unleashing a relentless series of sword strikes. Even so, Lobelia successfully dodged every one of them. As Boros swung another attack from the side, Lobelia leaped into the air to avoid it. He then cast an ominous chain that wrapped around Boros and restrained his movements. Boros recognized it as a clever tactic, but with his overwhelming strength, he shattered the chains almost immediately. After breaking free, he looked at Lobelia with a grin. Lobelia fully realized just how powerful Boros truly was. He raised his hand, causing dark clouds to gather across the sky. Calling down a devastating bolt of lightning, he unleashed it directly upon Boros. The sudden attack caught Boros off guard and struck him with tremendous force. For a moment, it appeared that the attack had finally defeated him. Lobelia then shifted his attention to Claudia and noticed that she still had not regained consciousness. He hurried over to her and tried to bring her back to her senses. At that moment, Boros slowly stood back up. He admitted that no one had ever overwhelmed him to that extent before and recognized Lobelia as the first person to accomplish it. Lobelia stared in disbelief after seeing that Boros had survived. At that moment, he realized that Boros possessed something far beyond what he had expected. A dark substance gradually spread over Boros' body as he began to transform. Boros acknowledged that he would have to become serious and admitted that Lobelia was strong. Moments later, he completed his transformation into his second form, revealing his true appearance as a dragon. Dragon Boros declared that no warrior had forced him into this form for the past 500 years. Even so, he believed that a mage carrying a grimoire could never match the true power of the dragon race. Lobelia responded that he had no intention of losing to someone like Boros. He wondered whether Boros knew what to call someone who was large in size but small in spirit. To Lobelia, such a person was nothing more than a small fry. Dragon Boros observed that Lobelia still had enough composure to speak such nonsense and wondered how much longer that confidence would last. He immediately stomped down toward Lobelia, but Lobelia avoided the attack without difficulty. In response, Lobelia cast the spell Disaster, summoning a powerful whirlwind that struck Boros before flames followed and engulfed him. The attack left Boros with several wounds. Lobelia noticed that Boros seemed different from before and began wondering if he should observe him more carefully. Nearby, Claudia still lay unconscious. As she remained asleep, she heard someone calling her name, and her mind drifted into a dream. In her dream, she was sitting at the family dining table. Her mother reminded her to put her book aside once she sat down to eat. Her father laughed after noticing that she was reading the very same book again, while Claudia remained devoted to it because it represented her greatest aspiration. After finishing her meal, Claudia asked for permission to go outside and play. Her mother agreed and simply reminded her to be careful. As a young girl, Claudia had admired the story of a certain female knight. The legendary owner of the holy sword Raishalom had saved countless innocent lives, and Claudia wished to become someone just like her. Growing up in the countryside, she trained with her sword in her own way. Throughout those years, both of her parents wholeheartedly supported her dream of becoming a knight. The dream shifted once more, showing her together with her childhood friends. They happily welcomed her, and one of them excitedly mentioned that Monica's exploration team had set off into the forest. Another friend pointed out that Monica had only recently been scolded by both her mother and father. Claudia thought that Monica had never really learned her lesson. Monica remained carefree because she believed Claudia would defeat any monsters they encountered. She also felt as though they were like real sisters. Claudia considered herself the oldest among them, while Monica questioned how that could be. Their other friends simply explained that it was because Monica behaved like the youngest child. Monica quickly argued back, calling the other girl a little brat. Even though Claudia knew she would eventually have to leave the village to become a knight, she did not want to be separated from her two close friends. Then the dream changed into a nightmare. The Dragon King took control of the village. The villagers lost everything they needed to survive, while anyone who resisted was killed. The heroic knight's castle hidden within the forest became the Dragon King's stronghold. The suffering did not end there. The Dragon King demanded that the villages offer young girls as sacrifices, and the very first one chosen was Monica. When Monica was taken away by force, she struggled with everything she had. Even in that moment, she believed that Claudia would defeat their captors before long, reminding everyone to remember that Claudia was strong. The following year, Claudia herself was chosen as the next sacrifice. Before the Dragon King's servants arrived, her family had already dug a hidden tunnel beneath the floor. It was meant to allow her to escape without being discovered by the Dragon King's underlings. Claudia did not want to leave alone. Instead, she wanted both of her parents to escape together with her. However, her father explained that the tunnel was only large enough for a child to crawl through. Her mother told her that as long as Claudia survived, that alone would be enough for them. Her father then entrusted his sword to her and wished for her to travel to the royal capital and become a remarkable knight. With no other choice, Claudia broke down in tears and embraced her parents, knowing it would be the last time she would ever see them. She had admired the legendary female knight and the holy sword Raishalom for as long as she could remember. Yet in the end she had been forced to leave behind her friends, her family, and the village she called home. Looking back on those memories, she could only see herself as a coward. After reliving those memories, Claudia finally opened her eyes. Lobelia noticed that she had awakened. Looking ahead, she saw Lobelia fighting the Dragon King and realized that a magical barrier had been protecting her the entire time she had been unconscious. She wondered if Lobelia had maintained it throughout the battle. Claudia understood that even if she knew she could not defeat the Dragon King alone, she still had to face him. She believed that running away would never become true atonement. Until now, she had been convinced of that. But at this moment, she was no longer alone. She now had a powerful ally fighting beside her. Defeating Boros and restoring peace to the village would become her true atonement. Meanwhile, Dragon Boros acknowledged that Lobelia had endured far longer than expected and questioned whether it was not enough already. Deciding to end the battle, Boros prepared his final technique, Dragon's Tear. A massive ball of fire gathered inside his mouth while Lobelia prepared himself to face the attack. At that moment, Claudia tightened her grip on her sword, rushed forward, and leaped onto Dragon Boros. Both Lobelia and Boros turned their attention toward her. Raising her sword high in midair, Claudia drew strength from the memories of her father, her mother, and Monica before driving her blade into Boros' head. Boros cried out in pain as Claudia was thrown from his body, but Lobelia quickly moved in and caught her before she could hit the ground. Claudia reminded Lobelia to handle the rest. Lobelia already understood and urged her to stay quiet and simply watch. Lobelia observed that Boros was finally beginning to show signs of exhaustion. However, he also understood why the dragon race was feared as the strongest. Their dragon blood possessed extraordinary regenerative power. Lobelia concluded that defeating Boros would require an attack powerful enough to overwhelm both his immense durability and his incredible healing ability. Realizing that there would be no second chance, he decided that the battle had to be settled with a single decisive attack. Lobelia began chanting his incantation, calling forth the Gate of Fear. He invoked the imaginary beasts that rampaged beyond it, offering a tribute to those that hungered for blood and flesh. When the spell was complete, he declared that Boros' rule would come to an end there. A massive, fictional gate from hell appeared behind Boros. Countless eyes stared at him with cold, unblinking gazes. Chains wrapped tightly around Boros, restraining him as they dragged him toward the gate. He was slowly pulled inside until the gate finally shut and locked behind him. Lobelia and Claudia remained standing as they silently looked at the closed gate for a moment. Claudia wondered where the door had led, but Lobelia himself did not know the answer. After the battle, the two returned to the village in Kansas, where the villagers had gathered. Instead of celebrating, insults spread through the crowd. Many believed that the terrifying roar from earlier and the strange phenomenon in the sky had been caused by black magic. They viewed it with fear and concluded that Lobelia was nothing more than an arrogant mage. Some even worried that, because of him, they might be killed as well. Lobelia remained calm on the outside, but inside he felt saddened as he realized that he was not welcomed by the very people he had saved. To him, returning to the village had ultimately been a waste of time. Hearing the villagers' words, Claudia tightly clenched her fist. Unable to remain silent, she condemned the villagers for their shameful behavior and regarded them as fools. She reminded them that the very first thing they had offered their benefactor was an insult. She made it clear that Lobelia was the one who had freed them from the Dragon King's tyranny and admitted that she alone had never been capable of defeating the Dragon King. Toto then hurried over and embraced Claudia, trying to calm her down. She apologized to Lobelia on behalf of the villagers, explaining that everyone understood what he had done but that they were simply overwhelmed by fear and anxiety. Lobelia accepted it without complaint. He had never defeated the Dragon King in exchange for praise, rewards, or compensation. Claudia wiped away her tears and called out to Lobelia as he prepared to leave. With sincere gratitude, she thanked him for everything he had done. One after another, the villagers also expressed their thanks. Lobelia gave no reply. He simply turned his back, continued walking away, and quietly raised one hand to wave goodbye. A few days later, inside the Heroic Knight Order Guild headquarters, a staff member approached Reinhard and handed him a letter sent by Claudia. The letter explained that the one who had defeated the Dragon King was Lobelia, and the revelation left Reinhard surprised. At another table, an unfamiliar young woman overheard the conversation. She was pleased by what she had learned, believing that Lobelia had once again gone out of his way to save someone. Lobelia walked across the bridge, and after arriving in the country, the first thing he planned to do was help people in need so he could build a good reputation. However, because of his infamous reputation and his sharp tongue, it was difficult for him to even start a conversation. He had already faced many rejections. Before long, a woman approached him. She grabbed onto him and pleaded for help because she was hungry. Lobelia looked at her and realized that a good opportunity had finally appeared. He offered her some dried meat, and the woman happily accepted it. He did not recognize who she was, but he thought that it would not hurt to raise the favorability of a beastman. After finishing the meal, the woman expressed her satisfaction and considered it a good one. Lobelia then called out to her and asked for her name. The woman revealed that the answer would surprise him because she was Rydia Katesith, the daughter of the Beastmen tribe leader. Lobelia simply stared at her and immediately decided that he should leave her behind. As soon as he turned around, Rydia called after him, demanding to know where he was going. The current leader of the Beastmen tribe was Rydia Katesith, and his daughter was Princess Rydia. She had a self-centered personality and had escaped from the strict control of her stern father as well as the tribe's rules. Rydia continued yelling at Lobelia, threatening that if he dared call her useless, she would kill every last one of him. Lobelia ignored her completely. Once Rydia eventually became the tribe's leader, she would start a large-scale war against the humans. If he became involved with her any further, it might no longer be just a matter of clearing his own name. Others could even see him as someone working together with another villain. In the game, only her name had ever been revealed, so there was neither any obligation nor any benefit for him to help her. He could simply capture her and hand her back to the Beastmen. Rydia continued begging, insisting that she wanted to at least give him a reward for helping her. Lobelia asked what kind of reward she meant. Rydia proudly declared that she would make him her husband. Lobelia immediately refused, but Rydia insisted that she had already fallen for him and wondered if he did not consider it an honor. Lobelia made it clear that he did not. Rydia then proudly drew attention to her large chest, but Lobelia simply told her to go home and called her a foolish cat. Instead of giving up, Rydia moved even closer and kept begging, saying she would even accept becoming nothing more than his pet. She refused to stop. Lobelia finally raised his voice, telling her that enough was enough. He told her that he had no time to waste on someone like her, especially someone who had brought the situation upon herself. Rydia became frightened and suddenly collapsed. Lobelia placed a hand on her forehead and wondered if she had a fever. After all, it was only natural for someone to end up in such a condition after living on the run without any plan. He could only see her as a truly troublesome fool. Lobelia prepared a pot of soup, and before long, Rydia woke up. The moment she saw the food, her eyes lit up. Lobelia wondered if the smell of the meal had been enough to wake her. He told her to eat it before it became cold. Rydia gratefully accepted it and began eating the soup. After taking a taste, she found it surprisingly delicious and learned that it was nothing more than simple egg porridge. As she happily continued eating, Radia became even more convinced that Lobelia should become her mate. The thought of eating meals like that every day filled her with excitement. Lobelia remained unmoved. He had no interest in taking care of a childish girl and told her that if her fever had already gone down, she should hurry back home. Radia refused. She did not want to return because there was someone she still needed to meet. Lobelia listened and wondered if she had simply run away because she disliked her hometown. Since he had defeated the Dragon King instead of the heroic knights, it would not be surprising if unexpected changes had started happening somewhere. If Radia had gained a purpose that originally should not have existed, then cooperating with her might allow him to gain something in return. Radia revealed that the person she wanted to meet was Rachel, a girl studying magic under someone named Noah. She explained that once she became the leader of the Beastmen, the tribe's rules would prevent her from ever leaving the forest again. Because of that, she absolutely had to meet Rachel one last time. Before she could finish explaining, Lobelia decided that he would take her there himself. In exchange, when she eventually became the leader of the Beastmen, he wanted her to fulfill one request for him. If she could agree to that condition, then the negotiation was complete. Radia became overjoyed and immediately hugged him in gratitude. Lobelia pushed her away and told her to stop clinging to him because he found it annoying. He then asked whether anyone was chasing her. After pausing for a moment, Radia admitted that 2 members of the heroic knights were pursuing her. As they continued talking, a man and a woman quietly watched them from a distance. The woman was Zordia. She believed that if they launched an ambush right there, they could certainly kill them. The man, Jake, immediately disagreed. He reminded her that their mission was to bring back the Beastmen tribe's princess. If they killed her instead, then war would become unavoidable. As Zordia considered that, the situation suddenly changed. Lobelia lifted Radia into his arms, and the 2 of them rose high above the trees. Zordia and Jake looked up in surprise as they watched them floating in the air. Lobelia regarded them as complete fools. At that pace, they would soon reach the open area while continuing to fly through the sky. At that moment, Lobelia noticed that multiple arrows were flying toward them. He reacted without hesitation and used the breath of the flame spirit. The flames spread through the air and immediately burned most of the incoming arrows before they could reach them. However, one arrow managed to slip past the flames. It continued flying toward Lobelia before exploding upon impact. Zordia questioned Jake, wondering if the situation was unfair since he had told her not to kill them. Jake admitted that he had not expected even half of the arrows to be stopped. After thinking for a moment, he decided that they should head to the landing site. As long as the princess was still alive, their mission could still be completed. Lobelia was already waiting for them when they arrived, watching them with a serious expression. Jake lightly mocked him, finding it unexpected that the arrogant magician had become the princess's bodyguard. Zordia asked if she had permission to kill him, but Jake refused. Instead, he promised to support her from the rear and told her to rely on him. Jake aimed his bow while preparing to fire. At the same time, Zordia let out a brief chuckle before rushing straight toward Lobelia, ready to strike him down with her scythe. However, Lobelia gathered force into his arm and used his bare arm to block Zordia's attack. Another strike followed immediately, and at the same moment, Jake released multiple arrows. Lobelia responded with ease, blocking every arrow that came his way. Lobelia successfully defended against all of their attacks. After the exchange ended, Zordia stepped back. Zordia found the situation dull and questioned why he was not fighting back. Lobelia remained serious because his goal was to have a conversation. Zordia questioned what there was to discuss with someone who had helped the princess escape, or rather, someone she considered a kidnapper. Jake stopped her from being too harsh and decided they should at least hear him out. He found it strange that Lobelia had not made a single aggressive move until then. Lobelia assured both of them that he had no intention of being hostile. Zordia immediately questioned what reason they had to believe him. Lobelia calmly explained that the reason was simple. If he truly wanted to kill them, he could have done so at any time. Jake acknowledged that point, but he still believed there had to be a proper reason for helping the princess escape. He asked Lobelia what his real purpose was. Lobelia answered that he only wanted to let Radia meet her friend. Both Jake and Zordia were left confused by that explanation. Lobelia believed that the heroic knights were not unreasonable people. If he spoke honestly, they might understand his intentions and allow it. Instead, both of them questioned whether everything he had said was nothing more than a lie. Lobelia became irritated. Realizing that talking would not work, he decided that the only thing left to do was buy enough time for Radia to escape the forest. Jake and Zordia immediately readied their weapons. At that moment, someone suddenly entered the scene. It was Radia, who immediately delivered a stunning dropkick straight into a face. Radia suddenly rushed forward and kicked Jake straight in the face, sending him flying to the ground. She looked proud of herself and acted as if that was all the lowly beings could do. Lobelia immediately scolded her, wondering what she was doing. Zordia turned her attention to the princess, realizing that she had decided to join the fight as well. She could not understand how her subordinate had ended up sprawled on the ground because of her. Without hesitating, Zordia charged at Radia, frightening her. Filled with anger, Zordia completely abandoned the mission and focused only on killing her. As Zordia continued attacking, Radia quickly avoided every strike. She even mocked her, believing that the attacks of those lowly humans would never hit her. Zordia became even more irritated and wanted her to stop moving around so much. She then placed one of her fingers into her mouth, bit down on it, and tore it open until blood flowed out. Radia froze in shock, and even Lobelia was surprised. Zordia had entered her berserk mode. Berserk mode was a limiter release that its owner activated intentionally, allowing the scythe to absorb blood. Once it reached that state, it no longer distinguished between friend and foe. Zordia's face darkened as she prepared another attack. Without wasting a moment, Lobelia grabbed Radia and carried her away. Zordia immediately swung at them, but Lobelia flew into the air just in time to avoid the attack. As they escaped, Lobelia scolded Radia and called her a fool because he had already told her to run away as quickly as possible. Radia insisted that she also had her pride and could not bring herself to run away while leaving her future husband behind. Lobelia immediately rejected that idea and wondered who would ever marry her. Neither of them realized that Zordia was still chasing after them. Once she entered that state, nothing could stop her. Lobelia had no desire to oppose the heroic Knight Order, but he still cast his magic, ominous chains, and tried to bind her. However, Zordia shattered the chains with ease, leaving even Lobelia surprised. Just as she was about to attack them again, another powerful strike suddenly sent her crashing to the ground. Lobelia wondered who had attacked her. When he looked closer, he realized it was Jake. Jake urged them to leave immediately because reinforcements would arrive soon, and if they stayed any longer, they would be caught. Lobelia questioned whether their mission had not been to bring Radia back. Jake admitted that it was, but the situation had changed. At that rate, Zordia would end up killing the princess as well. He decided to stay behind and buy them some time. Lobelia thanked Jake, surprised that he had been able to express his thoughts so directly. Before they left, Jake hoped that Radia would be able to meet the friend she had been searching for. Deep inside the forest, Lobelia continued traveling while carrying Radia. Radia apologized for everything that had happened. Lobelia replied that she was still young and inexperienced, so she would continue making many mistakes. Radia refused to believe that she would make mistakes, but Lobelia reminded her that as long as she remained alive, making mistakes was unavoidable. Each time, she would struggle through them in her own clumsy way. As long as she was alive, every problem could still be dealt with. Life was about getting back up after falling, and all of those accumulated efforts would someday. His thoughts suddenly stopped there as he wondered what would truly come from those efforts someday. Radia noticed the change in him and became curious, but he brushed it off as nothing. Lobelia thought that the voice inside his head had sounded strangely familiar, yet that could not be possible. The personality controlling this body was now his own. He decided that it had simply been his imagination and chose not to think about it any further. After that, the two of them continued walking through the forest. When they finally arrived, Lobelia looked around and recognized the place as the Hill of Flowers. There, they spotted a woman standing quietly. Hearing footsteps nearby, the woman turned and wondered who had arrived. The moment Radia called out to her, the two immediately recognized each other. Filled with happiness, they ran together and embraced. Both of them had missed each other, and their reunion brought them great joy. After calming down, Rachel introduced herself and became curious about the man accompanying Radia. Radia admitted that she had not even learned his name herself. Lobelia simply explained that he had no name to offer and that he was nothing more than a companion. Rachel accepted that answer without concern. She was grateful that he had safely brought her friend to this place. She also noticed his clothing and realized that he appeared to be a magician. Lobelia confirmed that she was correct, but before he could continue, Rachel quickly shifted the conversation. She found it exciting that she had not only reunited with her friend but had also met another magician besides her own master. Curious about his abilities, she wanted to see him cast a spell using the frightening crow beside him. Lobelia realized that Rachel had no idea who he truly was. He considered showing her a low-level spell, believing that would be harmless enough. Before he could do anything, however, a man suddenly called out to Rachel. After hearing what sounded like crying, the man came over to check what had happened. The moment he noticed Lobelia, he looked surprised. Lobelia immediately became cautious, thinking the man might recognize his true identity. Instead, the man's attention was completely drawn to Lobelia's remarkable spellbook. He excitedly asked if it was the genuine article. Lobelia was left confused as the man repeatedly apologized and eagerly begged for permission to see it. Since it was the first real spellbook he had ever encountered, he wished to hold it, even if only once. Although slightly annoyed, Lobelia eventually handed it over out of pity. The man gratefully accepted it. The man then suggested that they continue their conversation inside the house instead of standing outside. He welcomed everyone warmly and prepared tea for them. While they sat together, he eagerly tried to open the spellbook, but no matter what he did, it remained closed. Lobelia explained that the book only revealed its contents to the person it had chosen. The man had hoped that he would finally be able to read one. Rachel gently encouraged her master, reminding him that one day the spellbook might choose him as well and that he should not lose heart. Accepting her encouragement, the master decided to give up for the time being. It was also the master's first time meeting Radia, the princess of the Beastmen tribe. Radia sincerely thanked him for always taking care of her friend. The master humbly admitted that he appreciated the gratitude, but in truth, he felt that he was the one being looked after instead. Radia then revealed that she had heard her master had recently been running low on magical power. Because of that, she had brought a secret medicine from the Beastmen tribe. The master was genuinely surprised by the gift and realized that it would be a tremendous help. The medicine Radia had brought was meant to treat magical power depletion, a condition in which magic leaked out of the body after excessive use of magical energy. The Beastmen possessed a way to suppress that condition. As Lobelia quietly observed the situation, he realized that Radia also had a kind side. She had traveled all that way simply to bring the medicine for her friend's master. Rachel let out a quiet sigh and felt relieved that the medicine had finally arrived. With it, her working hours would likely become shorter. However, her master admitted that he would actually be happy if Rachel continued helping him. Radia reacted by thinking that he was a hopeless master, while Rachel simply accepted that it was just the way he was. Lobelia then stood up and asked if everything was finished, reminding Radia that it was time for them to head back. Radia was surprised that they were leaving already. The master kindly offered for them to stay longer, believing they must be exhausted after traveling such a long distance. He suggested that they could take things a little more slowly. Lobelia explained that they were being pursued. If they remained there any longer, the two of them might become involved and even be suspected of helping fugitives. If they truly cared about the well-being of the master and his disciple, then the best choice was to leave them out of it. Just before they departed, the master stopped them because he had something he wanted to give them. He presented a small box containing 2 rings. The moment Lobelia looked inside, he recognized them as engagement rings. Radia was stunned and immediately assumed that the master somehow knew they were going to be married. Rachel was equally surprised to learn that Radia would be getting married. The master explained that he was not giving them away because of marriage. They were actually magical items. Lobelia questioned why someone who understood the value of magical items would hand one over so easily to someone else. The master explained that his disciple had been deeply troubled because she had been unable to see her friend. Thanks to Lobelia bringing Radia there, he had finally been able to see Rachel smile again. On top of that, he had also been given the rare chance to hold a genuine spellbook. Because of those things, he felt that he could never thank Lobelia enough. After hearing his reasons, Lobelia decided to accept the gift. As they prepared to leave, the master wished them a safe journey. Rachel also hoped they would stay safe and well throughout their travels. Radia expressed her gratitude to both of them before the two continued on their way. Radia put on the ring and quickly realized that it truly was a magical item rather than an engagement ring. Lobelia called her a foolish cat, explaining that he could already feel magic flowing from it, proving that it was genuine. As he examined the ring, he felt unconvinced about its effects for the moment, deciding that he would investigate it properly after escorting Radia back to the Great Forest. As they continued traveling together, Lobelia reflected on the past month. Perhaps because he had been journeying alone all that time, traveling with Radia had turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. Lobelia called out to Radia. Curious, she wondered what he wanted. He admitted that there was something he had never told her. Radia immediately became excited and assumed that he had finally fallen for her, but Lobelia dismissed that idea without hesitation. In truth, Lobelia had grown rather fond of Radia. Because of that, he had already prepared himself for whatever reaction she might have. He finally revealed his name to her. He was Lobelia Crowley. The moment she heard it, the name sounded familiar. She soon realized that it belonged to the famous magician. Radia admitted that she had always been curious about what kind of terrible person he was, but she had never expected him to be like this. Hearing that description left Lobelia irritated as he questioned whether she truly thought he was kind. Instead of responding, he simply ignored her. Seeing his silence, Radia wondered if something was wrong and continued following after him. At that moment, someone suddenly called out Lobelia's name. When he looked ahead, he saw 2 men and 2 women watching them. Lobelia immediately realized that they were surrounded by both humans and beastmen. One of the beastmen called out to the princess, ordering her to come over at once. Radia looked toward Lobelia, but he calmly assured her that everything was fine. He told her that it was convenient that members of her own tribe had personally come to pick her up. He encouraged her to go, and Rydia walked over to her fellow beastmen. Lobelia believed that if Jake had safely escaped and delivered the message, everything should proceed without problems. There was no reason for him to do anything except stand down. However, one of the beastmen accused Lobelia of committing the serious crime of kidnapping the beastmen tribe's princess. More importantly, he blamed Lobelia for bringing their companions to the brink of death. Because of what had happened, they might never wake up again. The beastman angrily aimed his gun at Lobelia while continuing to accuse him. Lobelia questioned what he was talking about. The beastman explained that he had sensed the presence of dark magic on both Zordia and Jake, and Lobelia was the only person known to use dark magic. Lobelia insisted that it had not been him, but the beastman refused to listen. He ordered Lobelia to be silent and immediately fired his gun. The bullet struck Lobelia in the chest. His strength quickly began to fade, and as he weakened, Rydia looked at him with concern and tried to move toward him. At the headquarters of the Heroic Knights Order, deep inside the underground prison, Lobelia found himself locked away. He looked around the cell and saw that it was reinforced with shackling magic and surrounded by a powerful barrier. With those restraints in place, escaping was impossible. Lobelia wondered if Jake had truly been injured so badly that he still could not get back on his feet. He knew that the hero Reinhard would never listen to his side of the story. Reinhard had always considered him an enemy. If Lobelia chose to fight back now, it would only add even more crimes to the accusations already against him. The situation weighed heavily on his mind, and he realized that if things continued this way, it would be game over for him. A knock suddenly came from outside the cell. A princess had arrived. As she called out to him and hurried forward, she stumbled and fell to the ground. After getting back up, she approached him once more. Lobelia quickly recognized her. It was Lien. Lien was happy that he still remembered her. Lobelia immediately explained that he had already heard about what had happened to the members of the Heroic Knights Order, but he insisted that he was not responsible. Lien was relieved because she had already believed that from the beginning. She trusted that the man who had once saved her would never commit such a cruel act. Lien immediately decided that she would persuade everyone to believe him, but Lobelia stopped her. He told her there was no need because this was his own problem. Lien could not understand why he would refuse her help. She reminded him that she had never repaid the debt she owed him and wanted to prove that she could finally be of use. After her country had fallen, the kingdom was the only place she had left. Lobelia reminded her that helping her back then had only been something to pass the time, and he told her not to become involved with him anymore. Lien refused to accept that. As a member of royalty, she was determined to repay the favor she owed him. Just then, a guard noticed her standing outside the prison and questioned what she was doing there. Lien became flustered and nervously admitted to Yugal that she had deep feelings for Lobelia. Hearing those words left Lobelia feeling as though he had just heard something completely unexpected. Meanwhile, inside the medical room, Jake and Zordia remained unconscious as they lay resting. Elisha greeted Reinhard with a good morning, and he returned the greeting. Elisha admitted that she could not stop wondering whether everything they were doing was truly right. It was not that she rejected Reinhard's way of thinking, but accusing someone without proper evidence made her feel uneasy. Reinhard gently patted her head and told her that those thoughts only showed how kind she was. As far as he was concerned, Lobelia was the only magician capable of using dark magic, so there was no doubt that he was responsible. Reinhard reminded her that nothing angered him more than seeing his friends get hurt. He intended to make sure Lobelia would never lay a hand on his companions again. Elisha quietly fell silent. Reinhard then told her that he had to leave and asked her to continue looking after the patients. After he was gone, Elisha looked over at Jake and Zordia. At that moment, she noticed Jake's fingers move, leaving her surprised. Later, on the battlefield, someone approached the arena. Reinhard recognized the arrival immediately. Lobelia was escorted forward by several guards. Reinhard admitted that he had heard nothing about Lobelia for the past few months and had no idea what he had been planning. Even so, he had never imagined that Lobelia would harm the companions he treasured so much. Reinhard challenged him to face him in a fair duel. Lobelia questioned the reason for it. Reinhard declared that he intended to pass judgment with his own hands. Lobelia dismissed him as an idiot and wondered why talking things through had never been considered before resorting to a fight. Reinhard rejected the idea completely, believing there was nothing worth discussing with someone like him. Lobelia insisted once again that he had not committed the crime. Reinhard refused to believe him, claiming that they already had evidence and accusing him of adding more lies. With unwavering determination, Reinhard made it clear that he would never forgive him. The guards removed the chains from Lobelia's hands, making it clear that the duel was truly about to begin. Lobelia considered defeating Reinhard first and explaining the truth afterward, but he realized that if Reinhard were defeated, it would only stir the anger of the remaining members of the Heroic Knights Order. Because of that, he had already decided what he would do from the very beginning. Lobelia opened his magic book, and in the next moment, he stood face to face with the hero Reinhard, ready for the battle ahead. The duel between Lobelia and Reinhard began, and Reinhard was the first to make a move. He rushed forward and swung his sword, but Lobelia easily dodged the attack. Reinhard immediately followed with another strike, yet Lobelia avoided that one as well. Lobelia urged Reinhard to lower his sword, believing that someone of his level could never defeat him. Reinhard refused without hesitation. Lobelia decided that enough was enough and cast his magic, ominous chains. Dark chains shot forward and tightly wrapped around Reinhard, leaving him struggling to break free. While Reinhard fought against the restraints, Lobelia explained that he had never harmed his friends. It had been Zordia who went berserk, and Jake had been injured while trying to stop her. That was the true reason behind everything that had happened. Reinhard found the explanation far too convenient to believe. Lobelia told him to ask the people directly once they recovered because he had no desire to fight him. Reinhard replied that both of them remained unconscious, and there was even a chance they might never wake up again. Refusing to accept Lobelia's words, Reinhard unleashed the power of his sword and shattered the ominous chains. His anger only grew stronger. He accused Lobelia of trying to escape responsibility for his crimes and branded him a coward. Lobelia immediately noticed the power flowing from Reinhard's holy sword. Reinhard rushed forward again and managed to slash Lobelia across the arm. He warned Lobelia not to underestimate him before launching another attack. Even so, Lobelia continued avoiding every strike while preparing his own magic. Lobelia could not understand why Reinhard refused to listen. If he truly was a hero driven by justice, then he should have been willing to understand the truth. Lobelia questioned why Reinhard refused to believe him. He wondered if it was because of who he was. Was it simply because he was Lobelia? Or because everyone had already decided he was the villain? He finally reached his limit. The situation had become too ridiculous to continue, and he no longer intended to go easy on someone he considered a false hero. Lobelia opened his magic book, deciding that if words meant nothing, then he would make everyone understand through his strength. A heavy pressure spread across the battlefield, causing everyone nearby to become uneasy. Lobelia cast a black magic circle beneath Reinhard, and Reinhard immediately felt his strength fading away. He wondered if it was some kind of weakening spell. Before he could react further, Lobelia summoned a jet black spear and launched it at him. Then Lobelia rose into the air and drove a powerful punch into Reinhard's stomach. The force of the blow sent Reinhard crashing backward and shattered part of a nearby wall. Lobelia believed that if Reinhard truly was a hero, then that attack alone would only knock him unconscious. One angrily cursed Lobelia for daring to do such a thing to Reinhard. Another accused him of trying to kill not only their comrades but even their leader. Lobelia grew irritated. Reinhard had been the one who demanded the duel, and he himself had already been wounded by the holy sword. He warned everyone to stay back because he had no interest in dealing with insignificant opponents like them. Just then, Reinhard stopped the others from interfering. He insisted that it was a serious duel and admitted that Lobelia had simply counterattacked him. However, he also realized that fighting alone was reckless. He told everyone that they should defeat Lobelia together. If he could not overcome him by himself, then nothing else mattered. Reinhard shouted that he never wanted to see his friends get hurt again. Although his companions tried to stop him, Reinhard challenged Lobelia once more and urged him to continue the fight. Lobelia's expression turned serious. He declared that he would pin Reinhard down before immediately casting another spell. As arrows flew toward him from every direction, Reinhard closed the distance and slashed Lobelia across the arm again, sending blood spraying into the air. Lobelia immediately responded by casting the breath of the flame spirit. During the exchange, he noticed that Reinhard seemed to be growing stronger and stronger. With the blessing of the holy sword and the encouragement of his companions, Lobelia wondered if this was that troublesome phenomenon known as plot armor. Reinhard's anger continued to burn. He accused Lobelia of hurting his friends simply to kidnap Princess Rydia and questioned why he could still act so casually afterward. Lobelia avoided another attack and reminded Reinhard that he had already explained everything. Rydia had only left the Great Forest so she could meet an old friend, and he had merely acted as her escort to make that possible. Even after hearing that, Reinhard dismissed it as nothing more than another lie. Lobelia realized there was no point in saying anything else. At that moment, memories flashed through his mind. He saw himself lying in bed, believing that someone like him could never accomplish anything good. He remembered his father rejecting him and declaring that he was no longer his son. He realized that he could never overcome the bond Reinhard shared with everyone around him. That was the true loneliness carried by Lobelia. His emotions finally burst out. Lobelia shouted that Reinhard was the one who had abandoned so many people without ever listening to their side of the story. Reinhard froze in confusion, and before he could react, Lobelia's fist slammed into him. Reinhard was knocked off his feet. Lobelia demanded to know whether Reinhard believed he was great simply because he was the hero of justice. Grabbing Reinhard by the collar, Lobelia struck him again and questioned whether he deserved to be hated by everyone simply because he was Lobelia. Reinhard lay on the ground as Lobelia looked down at him. Lobelia admitted that all he had ever wanted was to live. He wanted a happy life where others would recognize him. He believed that he also had the right to make someone happy. He wanted the chance to protect others for his own reasons as well. As those feelings poured out, tears began running down his face. Reinhard stared at him in confusion, unable to understand why Lobelia was crying. Lobelia prepared to throw another punch, but his body suddenly refused to move. He wondered if Reinhard had somehow done something. Then he saw the truth. Reinhard had driven the holy sword straight into his stomach. Blood spilled from Lobelia's mouth as he coughed it up. Reinhard slowly rose to his feet and declared that everything was over. At that very moment, Elisha rushed onto the battlefield and desperately called for the fighting to stop. Lobelia immediately recognized Elisha and wondered why the main heroine of the game was standing there. She and the others moved in front of him, shielding him from further attacks. A man then told Reinhard that the fight was over. Reinhard refused to accept it and ordered Sieg to step aside, questioning why he was interfering. He had been only moments away from avenging his companions. Sieg replied that Reinhard was no longer acting like himself. Trying to kill someone without being certain of the truth was not like him. He explained that they had been mistaken, leaving Reinhard confused. Sieg revealed that Lobelia had never kidnapped the princess, nor had he injured Jake and Zordia. Everything Lobelia had said was true. Reinhard struggled to believe it and insisted that proof could be obtained immediately if necessary. Sieg questioned how Reinhard could remain so certain despite everything, but Reinhard answered that it was simply because Lobelia was an arrogant magician. Hearing those words, Lobelia quietly accepted that Reinhard believed he was right. No matter how much he struggled or how hard he tried to prove himself, no one would ever acknowledge him. If someone like Lobelia, who had never truly been saved by anyone, eventually chose to embrace evil, then perhaps he no longer needed to be saved either. At that moment, a familiar face stepped forward. It was Claudia. She declared that Lobelia had once saved them. Without him, her hometown would still be suffering under oppression. To her, Lobelia was unquestionably their savior. Sieg admitted that he had been doubtful at first after learning that Lobelia had defeated the Dragon King before he could. Even so, the truth remained that there were people who had been rescued from danger because of him. That was why Sieg chose to trust him. The royal guards also arrived at Lian's request. They declared that it was now their turn to protect Lobelia, the man who had once saved their princess. Elisha then explained that Jake had regained consciousness and told her everything. Lobelia had only helped Princess Radia meet her friend. When Zordia entered berserk mode, Lobelia had protected the princess from being killed. She pleaded with Reinhard to stop, reminding him that pointing his sword at an innocent person had gone far enough. Reinhard still refused to believe it. He insisted that it was impossible because Lobelia was evil and would never help anyone. Elisha could no longer stay silent. She confronted Reinhard for refusing to listen to her and for doing something so terrible without any evidence. She believed they should simply admit that they had been wrong. Reinhard still tried to justify everything by claiming it had all been for Jake and the others. Elisha angrily reminded him that neither Jake nor Zordia had ever asked him to do any of it. Reinhard had no answer. As his companions silently looked at him, his strength seemed to leave him, and he slowly dropped to his knees. Meanwhile, Elisha remained beside Lobelia, holding his hand while desperately treating his injuries and praying that he would survive. Lobelia did not want to die either. More than anything, he could not accept such a terrible ending. For the first time, he had saved someone, and now there were finally people willing to acknowledge him. He refused to let himself die in a place like this. He repeatedly told himself that he had to live. At that moment, the ring on his finger began to glow, almost as if it were urging him to keep living. The light grew brighter and brighter until even Sieg and Lian were forced to shield their eyes. When the brilliant light finally faded, both Lobelia and Elisha had vanished. When Elisha opened her eyes again, she found herself inside a cave. Only moments earlier, she had been treating Lobelia when a mysterious light had surrounded them, and then everything had changed. She carefully looked around the unfamiliar place. A faint breeze drifted in from somewhere deeper inside, making her think there might be an exit nearby. She decided to search for it, believing she might also discover the owner of the robe she had noticed. Before she could go any farther, Lobelia suddenly appeared right in front of her and stopped her by asking where she was going. The unexpected appearance startled Elisha so badly that she screamed. After they both settled down, Lobelia remarked that she had been so frightened she had even wet herself. Embarrassed, Elisha immediately wanted him to stop bringing it up. For a brief moment, Lobelia thought it might be one of those fortunate situations, but he quickly dismissed the idea. He considered himself a gentleman and refused to think that way. Elisha then reminded him that his wounds had not healed yet. Seeing him still covered in blood, she could not understand why he was already moving around. Lobelia explained that the ring had been given to him by a magician. It seemed to contain 2 enchanted spells that would automatically activate whenever its owner was in danger. The first was a powerful healing spell capable of completely restoring wounds inflicted by a holy sword with special powers. The second was a random teleportation spell. The ring had transported him into the cave, and after he returned from eliminating the goblins nesting there, Elisha had screamed the moment she saw him. Embarrassed, Elisha apologized, but Lobelia simply told her it was fine. Elisha then wondered when they would be able to return to the place they had come from. Lobelia explained that they would leave once the storm outside had passed. Hearing that, Elisha realized that the sound she had been hearing earlier had been the wind from the storm. After observing the abnormal weather outside the cave, Lobelia came to a realization. They had most likely been transported to the demon continent. Long ago, when it had still been known as the spirit continent, the first great war between the demon race and the human race had begun there and continued for 100 years. Countless living creatures had perished during that conflict, leaving behind only the strongest races and monsters. Because of that history, barren land and strange weather had become common throughout the continent. It was only his guess, but if his memory was correct, they had arrived somewhere in the southern part of the demon continent. Lobelia then looked over at Elisha as she slept peacefully. In her sleep, she quietly murmured Reinhard's name. Thinking about everything that had happened, Lobelia realized that only Elisha had been caught in the teleportation along with him. The thought made him wonder if people would accuse him of kidnapping her as well. He knew that Reinhard cared deeply for Elisha and would certainly search everywhere for her. However, the demon continent was an extremely dangerous place, and its harsh environment might keep the search parties away for the time being. Lobelia had already made up his mind. If he failed to return Elisha safely, Reinhard would surely kill him the next time they met. Because of that, he firmly decided that no matter what happened on this journey, his next mission would be to ensure Elisha's safe return. Lobelia continued traveling across the demon continent alongside the game's main heroine, Elisha. He quietly complained to himself about the miserable weather, thinking that the storm from the previous night must have blown away most of the clouds. Elisha called out to him, and he assumed she was asking for another heat resistance potion, telling her that the one she had used earlier was the last one he had. However, that was not what she wanted. Instead, she asked why he had been at odds with Reinhard all this time. Every time he appeared before them, he always looked angry. Lobelia questioned what good it would do to explain it, and Elisha had no answer. He simply remarked that, in any case, he had no intention of wasting any more time fighting her repeatedly. Elisha quietly accepted his response. Lobelia was the kind of person who could never feel satisfied unless he stood at the very top, which was why he personally disliked Reinhard. Since Reinhard had been getting in his way for so long, it was only natural that Elisha found his recent behavior suspicious. Before long, a loud noise echoed through the area, and several giant scorpions appeared. Lobelia dismissed them as nothing more than oversized insects and urged Elisha not to panic. Since she was a magician as well, he expected her to use fire magic. Lobelia attacked the monsters with his own magic while Elisha cast her fire spells. As another scorpion crept up behind her, Lobelia struck it down just before it could attack. The close call left Elisha breathing heavily, and Lobelia asked if she was already exhausted after so little effort. She denied it. Even so, it was understandable since she was fighting in an unfamiliar environment. Lobelia called her useless and remarked that it would only become troublesome if she collapsed there. Without another word, he picked Elisha up in his arms. She protested, feeling that it was inappropriate since they had only just met. Lobelia immediately dismissed her complaint, saying that he hated women who became burdens and looked as though they might die at any moment. Elisha argued back, insisting that she was not weak because even Reinhard had always praised her abilities. Lobelia remained unconvinced. His reaction offended her, leaving her quietly sulking with tears in her eyes. Watching her stubborn attitude, Lobelia thought she was surprisingly persistent. In a way, he even felt slightly envious that someone like her had chosen to care so deeply for Reinhard. Later, as they rested around a bonfire, Elisha still could not understand his actions. If the teleportation had truly been accidental, then there should have been no reason for him to keep looking after her. She wondered why he had not simply abandoned her. She even considered whether it was because she had defended him earlier. Lobelia gave no answer. Elisha explained that everything she had done back then had been for Reinhard's sake because she had not wanted him to become a murderer. Lobelia pointed out that although she claimed it was all for Reinhard, he had been the one who caused the trouble from the beginning. He then questioned whether she truly believed he deserved forgiveness. Without hesitation, Elisha believed he did because she saw him as a kind person. Her answer irritated Lobelia, and he remarked that she was just as twisted, leaving her confused by his response. Alicia, the heroine of the story, was an honest and gentle girl. She was clumsy, kind-hearted, loved flowers, and always wished for the happiness of others. The only real flaw she carried was how completely blind she was when it came to Reinhard. Lobelia simply could not understand or sympathize with the way she depended on him. Even so, he told her that whether or not she had defended him no longer mattered. As long as she remained by his side, he would not allow her to die. When Alicia wondered why, Lobelia answered that it was simply because her death would be inconvenient for him. If Alicia were to die, Lobelia knew it would place him in a difficult position. More importantly, he wanted her to live a long life alongside Reinhard so that she, the game's main heroine, could reach the happiness meant for her. Reinhard and Alicia had first met at a shrine deep within the Forbidden Forest, where Alicia had remained sealed away for 1,000 years. Feeling pity for her, Reinhard broke the seal, and that moment marked the beginning of the game's story. Hidden deep within Alicia was the power to overturn the entire world, making her one of the world's equilibria. If that power were lost, the world itself could face destruction. Countless people sought to misuse her abilities, which was why Lobelia had to protect her at all costs to prevent the story from reaching its bad ending. As the night continued, Alicia slowly fell asleep. Lobelia also began to doze off, feeling exhausted from constantly helping other people. Thinking that a short nap would not hurt, he closed his eyes. After confirming that Lobelia had fallen asleep, Alicia quietly lifted her head, looked at him, and slipped away. Since he had never revealed his true reason for helping her, she convinced herself that he must have been after her powers. As she ran, she did not encounter a single monster and began wondering if she had somehow reached a safe zone. Suddenly, the ground beneath her gave way, and she fell into an underground area. Looking around after landing, she wondered if she had fallen into a labyrinth. The opening in the ceiling was far too high to climb back through, leaving her with no choice but to search for another path leading to the surface. As Alicia walked through the labyrinth, she began to realize how helpless she truly was. Even after running away from Lobelia, she could not accomplish anything on her own. She eventually dropped to her knees and cried, missing everyone, especially Reinhard. She regretted the terrible things she had said to him and repeatedly apologized in her heart. Suddenly, the entire place shook. Alicia froze for a moment, wondering what had caused it. A frightening thought crossed her mind that perhaps the being living within the labyrinth had already noticed her presence. She immediately broke into a run, desperately trying to escape as quickly as possible. Before long, she spotted an open doorway and rushed toward it. As she looked inside, she realized too late that it was a monster. It slowly opened its eyes, revealing a massive body covered entirely with countless eyeballs. The terrifying sight left her frozen, unable to even speak from fear. Meanwhile, Lobelia suddenly woke up and immediately realized his mistake. He could not believe that Alicia had escaped while he had been sleeping. The footprints she had left behind were still fresh, though he knew there was a chance they had been made to mislead him. From the game's knowledge, he remembered that a labyrinth existed nearby, and anyone who traveled through that route had a much higher chance of encountering monsters. Since Alicia was not a combat-focused magician, she should have been defeated long ago. However, if the ruler of that part of the desert, the master of the labyrinth, had intentionally guided her toward him, then it would explain why she had reached the labyrinth without meeting any monsters. If that assumption was correct, then the boss room was the place he needed to head toward. To Lobelia, a labyrinth on the demon continent was nothing to worry about. During the game, he had cleared that place countless times. After landing on the ground, he immediately sensed the presence of monsters. Before long, the familiar lumps of flesh appeared before him. Every single one of them was A rank. To him, the timing felt just right, making them the perfect targets to relieve some of his frustration. The monsters let out deafening roars as they charged straight toward Lobelia. Remaining completely composed, he gathered magic into his hands before casting the Curse Break spell, instantly destroying the monsters. Another creature suddenly appeared behind him, but without even turning around, he struck it with the back of his fist and defeated it with ease. After that, he continued moving forward. He still remembered the path leading to the boss room and knew that all he had to do was turn at the next corner. As soon as he reached it, he spotted the familiar door. Realizing it was the correct one, he kicked it open without hesitation. Inside, he found the 100-eyed monster gripping Alicia tightly. The creature was just about to devour her as Alicia desperately called for help. Lobelia could only think that she truly was a troublesome woman. Without wasting another moment, he unleashed a void slash at the monster, severing its arms. As Alicia fell free, he caught her before she hit the ground and immediately followed up with deadly thunder, striking the monster with another powerful attack. Alicia called out to Lobelia and apologized, but he simply flicked her forehead and made it clear that they would settle everything after dealing with the monster. He then gathered magic into his hand, gradually shaping it into a spear. Once it had fully formed, he hurled it at the monster. The spear pierced straight through the creature, destroying it completely. After defeating the monster, a sudden pain struck Lobelia's head, causing him to weaken. Alicia immediately became concerned for him, and the two quietly walked away together. The S-rank fiend was a monster that continued evolving over time, making long battles increasingly dangerous. To avoid that, Lobelia had created a one-hit kill dark magic specifically for fighting demonic beasts. Although it worked as intended, the amount of magic power it consumed was exactly as great as he had expected. As they continued walking, Alicia apologized once again. She blamed herself for causing trouble by running away on her own. Lobelia simply told her to forget about it. He understood that she must have been frightened and uneasy around him. Because of his harsh way of speaking, he realized he needed to properly show that he was on her side, even if expressing it was difficult for him. Lobelia explained that he had never intended to make her his subject. He had no intention of letting her die in such a meaningless way and creating more trouble with Reinhard. For that reason alone, ensuring her safe return was the most reasonable choice. More importantly, she was different from all the ordinary fools he had met. He also reminded her to become more aware of her own situation, making sure she understood. Alicia nodded in agreement. She was about to say something else, and when Lobelia noticed, he asked if there was anything more. She simply thanked him for saving her. Lobelia then told her to call him only by his name and stop using honorifics because they felt unnecessarily formal. Alicia agreed. Not long afterward, Lobelia told Alicia that he wanted to make a detour to a certain town. Curious, she asked where they were going and he answered that it was Arcadia. Her expression immediately brightened because she recognized the name and remembered that it was the town managed by Reinhard. Arcadia was a town in the northwest that faced the sea. It had become a refuge where the hero gathered both humans and demons who had been displaced by the war against the Demon King. Although the hero's family had supposedly managed the town from one generation to the next, life on the harsh demon continent was difficult. Supplies were limited, and the support system had never been properly established. If events continued according to the game's scenario, the people living there would already be suffering from poverty because of poor supervision. By the end of the story, Reinhard would discover the truth and fall into despair. Since Lobelia was already on the demon continent, he intended to come up with measures to deal with the situation while he had the chance. Eventually, they arrived before what appeared to be the town gate. Alicia wondered if that really was Arcadia. Before either of them could move any closer, an arrow suddenly struck the ground in front of them, startling her. The guards demanded to know who they were and why they had come. Lobelia explained that they had lost their home during the war and had heard that anyone who reached this place would be given somewhere to live. Alicia looked confused by his explanation, but Lobelia quietly signaled for her to follow along if she wanted them to be welcomed. She then pleaded that they had nowhere else to go if they were turned away and asked for help. Hearing that, the guard's expression became serious, and he ordered the others to cease fire. A man approached Lobelia and Alicia, recognizing that they must have endured a long and difficult journey. He welcomed them and insisted that they come inside. As they walked through the town, they quietly looked around. People were lying asleep on the streets, and the sight filled Alicia with sadness. After arriving at the place where they would be staying, Alicia admitted that she had never imagined Arcadia was in such terrible condition. While preparing a meal, Lobelia explained that Reinhard was probably unaware of what the town had become. Arcadia had turned into nothing more than a convenient excuse to remove unwanted people while deceiving everyone else. From the beginning, society had never looked kindly upon relief efforts that also supported the demon race, who had once been regarded as enemies. Once the food was ready, he served it and urged Alicia to eat, reminding her that someone as helpless as she was would never recover without regaining her strength. Alicia gratefully accepted the meal. After tasting it, she found it surprisingly delicious. It was far better than the monster meat and rations she had been eating until then. She felt thankful that the townspeople had been willing to share their food with them. She admitted that it was truly delicious and unlike anything she had ever eaten while serving in the Knight's Order. Curious about the flavor, she wondered if the difference came from the spices. Lobelia simply told her to save those thoughts until after she had finished eating. As they continued their meal, Alicia suddenly noticed something and drew Lobelia's attention behind him. When he turned around, he found 3 people peeking through the window, their faces showing clear hunger. Alicia wondered what they should do. In the end, the 3 visitors were allowed to share the meal with Lobelia and Alicia. After finishing the food, they gratefully thanked them. The boy introduced himself as Ars, explaining that he had heard new people had arrived and wanted to come greet them. The girl introduced herself as Jasixa, admitting that she had grown tired of the plain food back home. The third was Rue, who apologized for their behavior, explaining that no ships had arrived for the past 3 months, making it impossible for them to hold back any longer. Hearing that, Lobelia realized the situation was even worse than he had imagined if outside aid had truly been cut off for 3 whole months. Lobelia then asked the 3 children what they thought of the hero. Each of them answered with harsh opinions, describing the hero as a hypocrite, scum, and the root of all evil. Lobelia let out a quiet chuckle, finding the accusations surprisingly severe, while Elisha lowered her head in embarrassment. At that moment, Lobelia decided that the first step should be teaching the three of them how to survive in the harsh world around them. His ultimate goal was for the people of Arcadia to become capable of surviving on their own without relying on the heroes. He asked the three children whether they wanted strength. They looked confused at first, but all of them eventually answered that they did. Elisha stared at him in disbelief, wondering if he was about to demand half of their lives in return. Lobelia responded with disbelief at the very idea before deciding to leave the matter there. He informed the three that he would train all of them together later and told them to be prepared. Before leaving, Lobelia informed Elisha that he was going out on patrol before nightfall. Elisha saw him off and reminded him to be careful. After heading outside, Lobelia reflected on how the townspeople had willingly shared their food with strangers even though outside aid had already been cut off. He felt that he needed to repay their kindness somehow. Thinking that there should be some easy prey nearby, he searched the area. Suddenly, an enormous foot stepped into view. It belonged to a giant pig, and Lobelia immediately considered it a stroke of luck. Without hesitation, he unleashed a jet-black spear and struck the beast. Finding a giant pig so quickly was an incredible stroke of fortune, and he decided to bring it back to the town immediately. However, after looking at its enormous body, he realized there was no way he could carry the whole thing. He concluded that he would simply take as much as he could. Just then, his spellbook suddenly began glowing. Something started emerging from within its pages. Long hair appeared first, followed by the form of a person. The figure knelt before Lobelia and introduced himself as the Dragon King, Boras, offering his service. Lobelia was about to finish Boras with his spear, but Boras stopped him and asked him to wait. He explained that he had no intention of being hostile and asked Lobelia to put away the annihilation spear. Lobelia questioned why Boras was still alive. Boras briefly explained that Lobelia's fictional Hell's Gate had given him a choice. He could either swear loyalty to Lobelia and serve him for the rest of his life or become one of the abominations lurking within. He chose to serve under Lobelia. Lobelia questioned whether those words were simply a way to stab him in the back. Boras denied it and explained that even after being released, the condition required him to wholeheartedly swear his loyalty. Besides that, the dragon race had always followed the strongest, and from the bottom of his heart, he found himself drawn to Lobelia. Even after hearing that, Lobelia felt no satisfaction from receiving such loyalty from a womanizing villain. He simply pressed his spellbook against Boras and told him to return. However, Boras stopped him, insisting that he would prove he could be useful. Lobelia then told him to prove it right there and then. Boras immediately moved to carry the dead giant pig, pointing out that it was meant to feed the people of Arcadia. He offered to transport it to the entrance of the town in Lobelia's place without being noticed. Lobelia accepted the proposal. Boras assured him there was no need to worry, as he could always return to the spellbook whenever necessary. As Lobelia watched him carry the giant pig, he admitted that Boras was surprisingly useful. Even so, he believed trusting him completely could leave him vulnerable, so he decided he would continue using Boras until the time came to judge him otherwise. The people of Arcadia were astonished when Lobelia presented the giant pig before them. He explained that simply receiving help from others did not sit well with him. He also mentioned that if any meat remained after everyone had eaten, they could preserve it by turning it into jerky or something similar. Many found it hard to believe that Lobelia had hunted such an enormous monster by himself. Others were simply grateful that Tori had come to their town. Everyone knew him as Tori, but Lobelia believed it was safer to keep the identity of the arrogant magician a secret. One of the warriors explained that they regularly hunted in Bone Eater Valley and invited Lobelia to join them and guide the group. Lobelia replied that he did not mind, and the warriors sincerely thanked him, saying his help would make a great difference. A young woman then called out to the warrior and asked if she could come along as well. Elisha explained that Tori had taught her some offensive magic during their journey to the town, and she wanted to use it to help. She also pointed out that she had been taught how important it was to gain experience through real battles. Lobelia agreed and encouraged her to do her best. The warrior also welcomed the idea, saying that the more supplies they could gather, the better. With everything settled, the group decided to go hunting as planned in 5 days. Later, during the hunt, Elisha unleashed a flame blast at a monster, bringing it down. Her companion praised her for the attack, but Elisha gave all the credit to Tori, believing that he was truly an excellent teacher. One of the hunters remarked that this was the biggest catch they had ever made. He also felt that stronger monsters had been appearing more often than before, but with those two by their side, he believed they would be fine. Hearing that, Lobelia quietly reflected on the situation. Now that it had been mentioned, he found it strange. Bone Eater Valley was supposed to be home to only a few low-level monsters. He wondered if defeating the fiend Gagros had disturbed the surrounding monsters and caused this change. Suddenly, one of the hunters noticed movement from a monster and immediately warned Elisha to be careful. The monster had regained consciousness and lunged forward, biting one of the women even as she drove her sword into it. Alicia could only stare in shock. The other hunters were equally stunned, wondering what had happened and whether they had failed to finish the monster. At that moment, another hunter quickly informed Lobelia that a group of monsters was approaching from the east. Lobelia immediately realized how dangerous the situation had become. Everything had descended into chaos in an instant, and he decided that getting everyone out of the area was the top priority. He ordered the group to fall back while he handled the remaining enemies himself. One of the hunters was about to point out that the injured woman was already dead, but Alicia continued doing everything she could to heal her. When she finally realized there was no hope and that the woman had already passed away, she quickly picked up her sword and stood. Lobelia noticed her actions and questioned what she intended to do. Without hesitation, Alicia charged forward and cut down every remaining monster by herself. After the battle ended, she quietly walked away before eventually collapsing to her knees. Lobelia watched her in silence. As tears began to fall, he approached her, and Alicia leaned against him as she broke down. Lobelia gently embraced her. At that moment, he realized that this girl was no longer the heroine he once believed always needed protection. She had endured the hardships of this unfamiliar land with her small body, and through those struggles, she had changed so much. Alicia struggled to hold back her emotions as she reflected on how she had once been completely alone inside the labyrinth, unable to do anything. She believed that from then on, she had to become stronger. Yet once again, she had ended up being protected by others. When it mattered the most, she had been unable to help. She feared that if things continued this way, she would no longer be able to face the rest of the Night Order. Overcome by despair, she desperately asked Lobelia what she should do. Lobelia remained silent, continuing to hold her in his embrace as he quietly comforted her. A month passed after that day. During that time, Lobelia taught the men how to hunt. The women learned how to cook while sharing their knowledge with the children. As for Ars, Jessica, and Ru, he trained them in response to the wishes of the orphan children who wanted the strength to help others. He spent time with them, shared meals, and taught them everything he knew about controlling magic. Ars was happy to receive his guidance, while Rue and Jessica praised Lobelia and believed they also had to work hard. As Lobelia observed the people of Arcadia, he realized they were all quick learners. He thought that perhaps they had always been talented but had never been given the chance to show their true potential. He also noticed that the town had become much livelier than before. Even Alicia seemed to have made friends without him ever realizing it. Meanwhile, one of the women spoke with Alicia and remarked that things had turned out rather well. Alicia looked at her with confusion, unsure of what she meant. The woman explained that although Alicia had someone she cared about, another man was protecting her so she could one day reunite with the one she loved. She also pointed out that while the man protecting Alicia looked a little intimidating, he was also quite handsome, making the whole situation feel like something from a fairy tale. Alicia admitted that she did not really understand. The woman then wondered whether Alicia had ever considered that Tori might have feelings for her. Completely confused, Alicia questioned what kind of feelings she meant, making the woman realize that Alicia was surprisingly slow to notice such things. The woman continued explaining that there could be a very good reason why that man wanted to protect her so much. One possibility was that he simply liked Alicia. At those words, Alicia's cheeks turned red. She did think Lobelia was a remarkable person, but she believed she did not have any romantic feelings for him. Meanwhile, the woman quietly felt certain that Alicia actually did. Alicia complained that the woman was always teasing her. In return, the woman wondered whether she was truly unhappy about it. Alicia admitted that it was not that she disliked it. Hearing that answer, the woman laughed, believing it only proved her point. Alicia quietly fell silent. Later that night, Alicia asked Lobelia why he had chosen to help the people of the town. Lobelia answered that there did not need to be a reason. Alicia then reflected on the person he had once been. Lobelia questioned whether she believed someone like him could never change. Realizing her words, Alicia apologized. Lobelia calmly told her that it did not bother him and reminded her not to apologize over every little thing. He believed that people could change. As long as they chose to walk the path of atonement, no matter how heavy the sins they carried, they could continue moving forward. Alicia then wondered whether someone like him could ever truly be forgiven. Lobelia admitted that he did not know. He understood that he had once gone far down the wrong path, but from now on he would no longer cause others pain or stand by while they suffered. If that was what it took, he was prepared to walk the path of redemption for the rest of his life. Alicia looked at Lobelia for a moment before asking what would happen if she wanted to walk the same path as him. She wondered whether it would be all right if she chose to stay by his side. Lobelia answered that he was fine on his own. He reminded her that she still had friends waiting for her. Alicia accepted his answer, admitting that he was right, and apologized for saying something strange. She then mentioned that he had something to take care of the next day and asked if it would be all right for her to head back first. Lobelia told her to go ahead. She thanked him, wished him a good night, and left. Once he was alone, Lobelia briefly wondered if she had wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. However, he quickly dismissed that thought. Another month passed. Lobelia continued training Alicia in swordsmanship. Alicia launched a series of strikes while Lobelia calmly blocked every attack. He then countered with a single move that knocked the wooden sword from her hands. Alicia sat down, admitting that she had not managed to land even a single hit on him that day. Lobelia considered her performance acceptable. He reflected that her quick and nimble movements made excellent use of her small frame, and her slashes were incredibly fast. As he had expected, Alicia possessed far more talent with the sword than with magic. In only a few months, she had already become unmatched in Arcadia. With the training finished, Lobelia announced that the morning session was over and that it was time to eat. Ars and Jessica greeted Lobelia and Alicia with a cheerful good morning, while Rue reminded the two not to push themselves too hard. While they were eating, Lobelia informed them that today's lesson would cover advanced magic. Ars became excited and wondered if they would finally learn the huge explosion spell. Lobelia told him that it was still too early because it could easily cause a disaster. Lobelia spent the morning training his disciples. Later, he was informed that everyone would be relying on him during that day's hunt. In the afternoon, he helped with various tasks around the town. It had become the usual routine, and he quietly felt that this might be the peaceful life he had been searching for. During the hunt, one of the hunters remarked that they had caught another large monster. Another replied that there had not been many casualties recently and that things had become much more stable. Lobelia observed that everything was progressing smoothly. At this rate, he began to think that restoring his name might no longer be just a distant dream. Just then, one of the women pointed toward the distance and wondered if the smoke rising into the sky was coming from the town. A few hours earlier, at the port of Arcadia, the town's leader was meeting with two knights. The ship of the Heroic Knight Order had finally arrived to deliver supplies. However, Alicia immediately felt that something was wrong. She questioned why members of the Spirit Church had come with them. The Spirit Church was an organization known for hating and persecuting demons. She had heard from the people of Arcadia that they even refused to acknowledge the existence of this place. While she was thinking about it, someone called out to her. The man recognized her immediately. It was Elliot. He greeted her after such a long time and mentioned that everyone had been searching for her. He also remarked that it was unfortunate that she had been sent to the demon continent. Alicia explained that someone had helped her after she arrived and that she was deeply grateful for that person. She also admitted that she had truly come to enjoy living in Arcadia. Elliot responded that he was glad to hear it. As Alicia looked around, she wondered where Reinhard was. Elliot explained that Reinhard had not come and had instead asked his best friend to handle the mission. He also remarked that it would only become troublesome if Reinhard had come himself. Alicia questioned what he meant by troublesome. Before Elliot could continue, the leader stepped forward, pushed him aside, and loudly complained about how difficult things had been. He explained that if Tori had not helped them, there was no telling what would have happened to everyone. He then questioned whether Elliot intended to leave them to starve to death. Elliot casually remarked that it must have been difficult for him. The leader immediately questioned Elliot's attitude and reminded him that they were the ones who had guaranteed everyone's safety. Without hesitation, Elliot ordered the man to be quiet, drew his sword, and cut off the leader's head with a single slash. He pointed out that he had already ordered the man to hand over the demons, but the leader had refused to obey. Believing the man to be a fool, Elliot sought confirmation from the priest standing beside him. The priest agreed without hesitation. Alicia immediately dropped to her knees beside the lifeless body, stunned by what had just happened. Elliot urged her not to make such an expression and reminded her that she was finally leaving that filthy place behind. Their true purpose had been to purge the demons of Arcadia. Anyone foolish enough to question what they called this righteous purge, or anyone who dared resist, would be put to death. After the incident, Lobelia returned from the hunt only to find the town reduced to ruins. Nearby, Ars called out to him while holding Rue's hand as Ray lay motionless on the ground. Ars desperately wondered if Ray would be all right and hoped that Lobelia could save him. Lobelia looked silently at Rue's critical condition before taking out a potion. After examining him, he realized that even panacea could not bring the dead back to life. Hearing that, Jessica broke down in tears. Afterward, Lobelia joined the town's remaining warriors in searching for survivors. In the end, they found only 30 people still alive. Alicia was nowhere to be found, but Lobelia believed there was no way someone with her swordsmanship could have died so easily. He assumed that she might still be somewhere else, searching for other survivors. The group questioned one of the survivors and learned the truth. The Spirit Church and the Heroic Knight Order have been working together all along. Because of that alliance, even more demons had been slaughtered. In the original story, Elliot had simply reported that Arcadia had fallen into poverty due to a lack of supervision, leading to internal conflict that eventually destroyed the town. That was all he had ever said. Reinhard had complete trust in his best friend, so he had never questioned those words. Lobelia reflected on everything that had happened. He had believed that if he could restore Arcadia, peace would continue forever. Everyone had finally found a reason to live and had begun living happily, only for everything to be taken away within a matter of hours. At that moment, Yae appeared and was relieved to find that they were still alive. She immediately asked Tori what they should do next, while one of the others expressed relief that she had survived. Yae then revealed that Ellie had been taken away by those people. Lobelia immediately questioned what she meant. Yae explained everything that had happened. Ellie had stood in front of everyone to protect them when they were about to be killed. Then a blonde man named Elliot appeared and promised that if Ellie obediently followed him, everyone else would be spared. It had all been a lie. Yae had somehow managed to escape, but in the end, nearly everyone had been killed, and Ellie had been dragged away before her eyes. Lobelia questioned whether he was destined to keep making the wrong choices simply because he was the villain. He wondered if surviving meant becoming the very Lobelia Crowley he had tried to leave behind. He had endured enough. For the sake of the people he held dear, he was willing to become anything. If something precious had been taken from him, then he would take it back. A sudden laugh escaped Lobelia and continued without restraint. The people around him grew concerned by his unusual behavior. Then, without hiding it any longer, he revealed that he was not Tori at all. He was the arrogant magician, Lobelia Crowley. Meanwhile, aboard the heroic Night Order's ship, Elisha remained bound in restraints. Elliot appeared to be enjoying himself, treating the situation as entertainment while urging her to stop looking so downcast and join in the celebration. To him, it was a truly wonderful day. Elisha pointed out that Elliot had taken the lives of innocent people, yet he was still able to sit there and drink as if nothing had happened. Elliot dismissed her words, insisting that the very birth of a demon was a sin. Overcome with anger, Elisha slammed her head into his chin. Elliot glared at her for a brief moment before striking her across the face, sending her to the floor. Elliot stepped closer, questioning when she had become bold enough to glare at him like that. He wondered if she had lost her mind after coming to the demon continent. Grabbing hold of her, he reminded her that she had always hidden behind Reinhard, yet now she dared to stand against him as though she were someone important. He revealed that the only reason he had kept her alive was because he intended to make her his woman. Elliot forced himself on Elisha while she struggled to resist. He mocked her by telling her to call for Reinhard to save her, convinced that no one would ever come for her. In her desperation, Elisha quietly called out for Lobelia instead. The moment Elliot heard that name, he recognized it. At the same time, a loud noise echoed from outside the ship. He immediately went to investigate and found his men confronting a group of figures dressed in black robes. One voice declared that from that moment onward, hell had begun. The instant Elliot saw Lobelia standing before him, fear spread across his face. The people of Arcadia immediately launched their attack while the members of the Spirit Church rushed to activate a barrier. However, they were already too late, and they were quickly cut down. One member of the Spirit Church warned the priest that they were at a disadvantage, but the priest ordered everyone to protect him at all costs and prevent the enemy from breaking through. Elliot drew his sword and charged straight at Lobelia. The moment he swung his blade, it was stopped by a magic barrier. Before Elliot could react, Lobelia seized him by the face and slammed him violently into the ground. Witnessing how easily Elliot had been defeated, the remaining enemies tried to flee. Lobelia had no intention of letting anyone escape. He activated his jet black spears, and each fleeing enemy was struck down. Only one remained. The survivor dropped to his knees and desperately begged for his life as Lobelia stood before him. Without showing mercy, Lobelia drove his spear through the man's head and down to his neck. To Lobelia, the god these people worshipped was worthless. He was determined to make them experience the same suffering they had inflicted upon Arcadia. As he boarded the ship, he wondered whether Elisha was somewhere inside. Before long, he noticed a nearby room that was the only one with its door left open. The moment he stepped inside, a fireball spell flew toward him, but his magic barrier blocked it without difficulty. The one who had cast it was Elisha. The instant their eyes met, Lobelia immediately noticed the bruise on her face. As he slowly approached her, he realized that Elisha was trembling. Looking down at his own blood-covered hands, he understood why. It was only natural that she would be frightened after seeing him drenched in the blood of everyone he had just killed. At that moment, he knew that he truly looked like the villain now. Elisha broke down in tears, convinced that Lobelia would come for her. Lobelia quietly wondered how foolish it was to place that kind of trust in someone like him. He then took out a potion and instructed her to drink the recovery potion before returning to the others. Elisha observed that she had never seen a potion like it before and noticed that its color looked unusual. Lobelia showed a hint of impatience and urged her to simply drink it. Elisha agreed and swallowed the potion. The moment it went down, she immediately felt dizzy, and before long, she drifted into a deep sleep. The potion did more than restore her. It also carried the effect of inducing sleep. Lobelia knew he could not allow Alicia to witness the devastation waiting outside. Lobelia then asked one of the warriors about the situation. He was informed that all the enemies outside had been eliminated, but Ars was nowhere to be found. Hearing that left Lobelia stunned. To him, Ars was the most talented among his disciples when it came to advanced magic. Ars had repeatedly insisted that he wanted to avenge Rue, and in the end, Lobelia had given in. Now he could not help but think that perhaps he should never have allowed Ars to come in the first place. A powerful explosion suddenly echoed from outside the ship, making everyone wonder if there were still enemies remaining aboard. Lobelia immediately reminded himself to stay focused. He could not afford to make any more mistakes. He ordered everyone to evacuate and return to the fishing boat. He would deal with the remaining enemies himself and catch up after he found Ars. His companions tried to object, but Lobelia firmly ordered them to leave, making it clear that it was not a request but an order. As he began searching the ship alone, he reflected that the recent explosion had probably pushed the vessel to its limit. Searching in large groups would only increase the risk of the ship sinking, and he refused to watch any more of his comrades lose their lives. Then a voice echoed from above, remarking that it had been a gamble, but one that had paid off. Lobelia looked up and found Elliot standing there, holding Ars hostage with his sword pressed against the boys. Elliot began mocking Lobelia, wondering how the people of Arcadia had managed to find someone like him to protect them. Lobelia paid no attention to the taunts and simply demanded that Ars be released. Elliot observed that Lobelia seemed to be the type who genuinely cared about a child's life. He then brought up how Alicia had called out Lobelia's name earlier and questioned whether something had happened between the two after they disappeared together. Finally, he offered to release Ars on one condition, that Lobelia take his own life. Ars immediately protested, insisting that if anyone had to die, it should be him instead. He refused to fear death and believed that even if he lost his life there, his master would surely avenge Rue and everyone else. Annoyed by those words, Elliot pressed his sword more firmly against Ars's neck. At that moment, Lobelia activated his ominous chains in an attempt to drag Elliot down. However, he quickly realized that Elliot had switched places with Ars, causing the chains to pull Ars instead. Lobelia immediately recognized that this was the power of Elliot's divine armament. Ars fell to the ground. Lobelia rushed over to him without hesitation and was relieved to find that he was still alive. He realized that he had not been able to release the chains in time. As he took out a potion, he understood that it was the strongest panacea he possessed, and it should be powerful enough to stop the corrosive effects of black magic. Elliot then questioned whether Ray, the boy Lobelia cared about, had been a member of the demon clan. He pointed out that Lobelia himself was human, yet he spoke such nonsense. Elliot declared that people like Lobelia disgusted him and insisted that Lobelia could never understand. He reflected on what it was like to watch family and friends be tortured before his eyes by demons, to suffer the humiliation of being broken and tormented. To him, Lobelia was nothing more than a naive young man who had no right to speak as though he understood such suffering. With that, Elliot slashed his sword, sending a powerful strike toward Lobelia. However, the attack failed to hit him. Lobelia realized that he first needed to create distance between Elliot and Ars. He gathered fire magic into his hand and cast it, creating a blazing wall of flames that separated the two. Elliot admitted that he simply could not understand why the arrogant and infamous Lobelia would fight for the sake of someone else. Lobelia replied that he had no intention of being understood by someone as rotten as Elliot. Elliot answered that he had no intention of losing to a soft-hearted fool like Lobelia. He immediately charged forward and swung his sword, but Lobelia blocked the attack with his own arm. As their battle continued, Lobelia wondered if Elliot had also once been betrayed by demons, just as he had. In that sense, they were alike, both villains consumed by revenge. Even so, Lobelia could never forgive Elliot for hurting Rue and the comrades he held dear. There was no longer any room for him to back down. As the battle continued, Lobelia carefully observed Elliot's divine armament, Grady Switch. It possessed the troublesome ability to swap its user's position with a designated target. However, the skill had a long cooldown, and its range was not unlimited. At the same time, Lobelia considered using black magic capable of wiping out any enemies who might still remain inside the ship. Then the idea of using fictional Hell's Gate came to mind. He realized that if he wanted to make it large enough to swallow the entire ship, he would have to conserve his magic until it was fully charged. Because of that, he could not afford to waste his mana on flashy spells. It would make defeating Elliot in a single strike much more difficult, but that suited him perfectly. Lobelia had no intention of granting Elliot a painless death. Instead, he wanted to make him experience the fear of death and the pain he had brought upon others. Meanwhile, Alicia slowly regained consciousness. As she opened her eyes, she could not remember what had happened. Yuma noticed that she was awake. Alicia immediately asked where Lobelia was. Yuma informed her that he was still aboard the ship. Alicia insisted that she had to return, but Yuma stopped her. He admitted that they all wanted to go back as well, but Lobelia had placed her safety above everything else. He reminded her that if she returned now, she would only get caught in the battle and lose her life. Alicia could only struggle to accept it. As the fierce battle continued, both fighters stepped back and faced each other once more. Lobelia stared at Elliot, wondering why that man still carried such unwavering confidence. He thought that even if Elliot somehow won the fight, there would be no escape once the ship sank beneath the sea. Lobelia questioned whether Elliot's confidence was nothing more than empty arrogance or whether he had another plan hidden away. Elliot then declared that the next exchange would decide everything and prepared himself for the final clash. Lobelia dismissed his confidence, believing the outcome was already obvious. Without another moment of hesitation, Elliot charged forward while Lobelia prepared his magic. The two rushed toward each other at full speed. Lobelia's fall abyss collided with Elliot's frost blade, and the impact triggered a massive explosion. Blood burst into the air. When the smoke cleared, Lobelia had severed both of Elliot's legs. Elliot cried out in pain as he collapsed from the loss of his limbs, while Lobelia stood before him, fully intending to end his life. Panic quickly overtook Elliot. Realizing his situation, he pleaded for Lobelia to stop and questioned whether he intended to torture him as well. Then, in an instant, Elliot activated his swap ability, exchanging places with the priest. Seeing the sudden change, Lobelia questioned why the priest had appeared there. The priest immediately recognized him as the arrogant magician. At that moment, Lobelia understood what had happened. Elliot had used Grady Switch once again, meaning there had still been someone outside the battlefield with whom he could exchange positions. Lobelia reflected on what had just happened. He realized that he had hesitated for only a brief moment, and Elliot had immediately taken advantage of that opening. He could not help but wonder if, deep down, he had unconsciously sympathized with Elliot's circumstances. The priest trembled in fear, unable to understand what had happened. Only moments earlier, he had been safely aboard the boat, and now he found himself standing before Lobelia. In panic, he cursed Elliot for dragging him into the situation. Realizing there was no other option, the priest desperately pleaded for Lobelia to spare his life. Lobelia looked at him with a cold, unreadable expression. The priest quickly offered a deal, promising that if Lobelia saved him, he would arrange for the Spirit Church to fully cooperate with Arcadia. He admitted that Elliot had forced them into everything that had happened and begged to be forgiven. He continued pleading, insisting that he would never forget this debt for as long as he lived. Believing that his words had convinced Lobelia, he truly expected to be spared. Instead, Lobelia cleanly severed the priest's head. Fictional Hell's Gate was only moments away from activating, and Lobelia realized he had already wasted more time than necessary. He turned toward Ars, apologized for making him wait, and reminded him that they needed to escape the ship as well. Meanwhile, elsewhere aboard the vessel, Elliot muttered that this was exactly what happened when someone failed to finish Lobelia with a single blow. He decided that he would report everything to Reinhard. Together with the full strength of the heroic Knight Order, they would launch another attack and slaughter every last one of them. His hatred toward the demons and those who sided with them still burned deeply within him. Just then, a calm and cheerful voice reached his ears, observing that Elliot did not seem to feel even the slightest remorse. Startled, Elliot immediately demanded to know who was there. The newcomer introduced himself as Boros, the Dragon King and a direct subordinate of the arrogant magician. Elliot stared in disbelief, believing that Boros should have already been defeated by Lobelia. Boros calmly explained that his master had ordered him not to reveal himself in public, leaving him with no choice but to watch everything in silence. He added that Elliot had shown nothing but disrespect toward his master, and he had been wanting to kill him ever since. Boros then remarked that, now that they were alone, he was finally free to do as he pleased. Elliot struggled to respond, but Boros assured him that he had no intention of killing him immediately. Instead, he planned to begin by peeling away every piece of his skin. Without another word, Boros mercilessly began skinning Elliot alive, leaving Elliot unable to do anything except scream in unbearable agony. At last, the battle reached its climax. Fictional Hell's Gate began swallowing the entire ship. Carrying Ars in his arms, Lobelia leaped from the vessel and plunged into the sea. He immediately used magic to propel himself back to the surface and emerged from the water. As he caught his breath, he reflected that if he had been the original Lobelia, the situation would have been handled in a far more logical way. He still had not reached that level. Before long, another ship approached, and the people of Arcadia waved toward him while calling out his name. A short while later, they pulled him aboard the boat. As Lobelia lay down to rest, he noticed Boros flying overhead. Boros cheerfully greeted him while carrying Elliot's severed head. Lobelia realized that Boros had truly defeated Elliot. Although he still did not fully trust him, Boros had proven himself useful. Quietly, Lobelia decided that perhaps he could stop treating him so coldly at least a little. At last, everything was over. Elisha approached him, relieved that he had survived, and embraced him. Around them, Lobelia's comrades broke into tears, overwhelmed with relief because they had feared he would not make it back in time. Lobelia quietly wondered if they were truly that happy simply because he was still alive. He brushed it off in his usual way, believing there was no chance he would die in a place like that. He was then told that Elisha had been thinking about him the entire time and had constantly prayed for his safety. Everyone was genuinely relieved that he had returned alive. Lobelia then asked Elisha whether she had revealed her real identity to the others. Elisha explained that everyone had already learned who Lobelia truly was, so she had also told them about herself, including the fact that she had once belonged to the heroic Night Order. She admitted that when she saw the enormous black gate swallow the Night Order's ship, she had become so worried that she felt she could barely endure it. She realized that she could no longer imagine living a life without Lobelia. Lobelia reminded her that Reinhard was still waiting for her. Elisha firmly rejected that thought. She made it clear that no matter how many times Lobelia tried to push her away, she wanted to continue living by his side and would never give up, because she loved him. Lobelia had always believed that Elisha was the heroine who truly belonged with the story's protagonist, so he had continued pushing her away. He thought he had already accepted that. But now, he finally understood how terrifying it was to lose her. In the end, Lobelia simply told her to do as she pleased. Elisha happily accepted that answer and resolved to do exactly that. The group returned to Arcadia without losing a single person during the rescue. Lobelia announced their victory, but no one celebrated. Instead, they began clearing away the rubble, treating the wounded, repairing every building that could still be saved, and gathering the bodies of those who had fallen in the town square. When they had finished gathering the dead, they lit the funeral fire and gave them their final farewell. As Lobelia looked upon them one last time, memories of the time they had shared filled his mind. He could not help but think that if he had never left the town that day, none of them would have died. Looking back, all that remained was regret. Even so, he understood that the only thing left for those who had survived was to keep living for the sake of those who no longer could. 3 days later, Lobelia approached Boros. The moment Boros saw him, he greeted his master with a cheerful expression. Lobelia questioned whether he was a dog or something similar. Boros calmly explained that no loyal subordinate could remain indifferent when their master appeared before them. Lobelia admitted that Boros had contributed greatly during the battle. Although it had not been his original intention, he decided to officially acknowledge Boros as one of his subordinates. Hearing those words, Boros immediately knelt down, believing it to be the greatest honor he could receive. Afterward, he casually brought up Elisha, mentioning that she and Lobelia seemed to have become quite close. Lobelia questioned whether Boros was teasing him, causing Boros to quickly deny the idea. Even so, Lobelia quietly reflected on those words. Since Boros had noticed it as well, he found that he could not completely deny it. Whenever he tried to walk away, Elisha would look lonely. At night, she would even quietly slip into his bed and sleep beside him. Boros then casually wondered when the ceremony would take place. Lobelia looked at him in confusion, unsure of what he meant. Boros explained that if two people were dating, marriage was naturally the goal. Only then did Lobelia realize that this was how relationships worked in this world. That meant all of Elisha's bold actions had carried that meaning from the very beginning. He found himself wondering what he was supposed to do, realizing he knew almost nothing about how marriage actually worked. Unable to figure it out on his own, he asked Boros what people were supposed to do in a marriage. A week later, Elisha hurried Lobelia along. One of his disciples pulled him forward, reminding him that he had overslept again because Yuma's speech was about to begin. Yuma stood before everyone and thanked them for gathering. He reflected on how, despite their grief, everyone had spent the past week working hard to rebuild the town. Their enemies had taken away people they cared about and left behind tremendous destruction. Even so, they had not lost everything. As long as they continued to live, Arcadia's history would live on with them. He encouraged everyone to honor the will of those who had come before them and take another step into the future. From that day onward, they would uphold the name of the true Arcadia, a place where humans and demons could live together. With those words, he declared that the day marked the town's rebirth and encouraged everyone to eat well, rest, and recover their strength. As Lobelia watched the people eating together, singing and dancing, he quietly admired their resilience. No matter what hardships they faced, they always found the strength to move forward. With Yuma leading them, he believed the town would only continue to grow stronger. Before long, Elisha approached him while carrying freshly prepared food. She invited him to sit down and rest together. Lobelia accepted, and as they sat side by side, only one thought remained in his heart: to protect this warm and precious peace.